take the 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Senate Finance Committee. Today is Thursday, February 15th. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to read the bill order, and then we're going to start with our first bill. So order for today is Senate Bill 374, Senate Bill 347, Senate Bill 158, Senate Bill 332, Senate Bill 403, Senate Bill 436, and Senate Bill 119. I will say that the sponsor will have as much time as he needs to present a bill. Everyone else has 2 minutes, and I will ask you to respect that 2 minutes. And if not, I will help you respect the 2 minutes. But our first bill is Senator Wallstreicher, so welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Madam Vice Chair. It's a pleasure to be before you for the first time this year. In 1996, the federal government passed a law called the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996. That's 42 USC 666 A13A. And that federal law required state licensing agencies to obtain Social Security numbers for the purposes of licensing. The 1996 federal law had nothing to do with immigration status, nothing to do with that at all. The purpose of the federal law was to make sure people are paying their child support. And so you had to give your Social Security number so that the state could check to make sure you weren't in arrears on your child support. And if you were in arrears, your license was denied. Unfortunately, that federal law, which we implemented in 1997 in the General Assembly, has caught people in its clause that weren't intended to be caught in its clause. So people can prove their identity and that they are current on child support without a Social Security number. Last year, this committee and this body passed a law that said a Social Security number is not necessary for licensing under the Health General article. But EMTs are not licensed in the Health General. They're licensed in our education article, and that was accidentally not included in last year's bill. So this is a technical fix that would allow EMTs to get licensed so long as they are current on their child support, which of course is the basis of the original law, and can prove their identity. You're going to hear how this impacted a constituent of mine from Montgomery County who became a volunteer at age 16 as an EMT. She continues to volunteer in that capacity. When she became 18 and was promoted from within the organization in a way that would require the license, she learned for the first time in her life that she did not have a Social Security number. And you're going to hear about that soon. So with that, we hope you can pass this technical fix on a favorable basis, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So who's next on your panel Dr. Delbridge, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Ted Delbridge, Executive Director of the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, or MEMS. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for this opportunity. This, to us, seems pretty straightforward. I'm here on behalf of the State EMS Board, which asks for Social Security numbers in the process of issuing certificates or licenses only to be in compliance with Title 8 of the United States Code, which prohibits anyone who is not a qualified alien or non-immigrant from obtaining a public benefit, which is defined as a professional license provided by an agency of a state. But as the senator points out, the state can provide an exemption to that to make an individual who is not lawfully present in the United States eligible for a public benefit that they would otherwise be ineligible for through enactment of a state law. And as pointed out, the legislator did that last year with regard to other healthcare occupations. And it seems pretty straightforward and only appropriate to do that for EMS personnel too. And so we urge a favorable report for Senate Bill 374. Thanks.
Thank you. Who's next? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Gam WJ Tunga. I'm past president of the Wheaton Volunteer Rescue Squad and a paramedic and firefighter. I volunteer in Wheaton, Maryland. Last year in Wheaton, volunteer and career EMTs and paramedics and firefighters responded to over 10,000 calls for service. Our 100 plus volunteers provided nearly 80,000 hours of service while responding to fires, car crashes, assaults, cardiac arrests, overdoses, births, and the occasional cat stuck in a tree. It's dangerous work. We get sick and injured both physically and mentally, and the work places enormous strain on our families. No matter how difficult the burden we face, the 911 calls keep coming, and we can't let our community down. Keeping our ambulances and trucks staffed is a matter of life and death. Every volunteer that gets certified and licensed by the Maryland EMS Board fills a critical position in the field. Senate Bill 374 will allow us to immediately increase our staffing by one person, Natalie, and hopefully more in the future. Amending Maryland law seems an extreme length to go to put just one more EMT on an ambulance in Wheaton, but this really reflects the urgency of our need. Again, the 911 calls don't stop coming just because red tape is standing in the way. I applaud you for working together to remove this barrier, and you will help a lot of people in Wheaton and throughout the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Melanie Perez Cruz.
Will you pull the microphone closer? It'll just pull right over. Thank you, Madeline.
Sorry. Hi, my name's Melanie Perez Cruz, and I stand before you today in support of SB 374, the EMS bill. I have been here since I was 5 years old, and I'm actually a nationally registered EMT. I've served as a volunteer rescuer in Maryland until current state law and red tape prevented me and others like me from serving our community. I've been a member of the Wheaton Volunteer Rescue Squad for the past 5 years, and my desire to serve was actually sparked by personal experience. When I was 8, my mother suffered a severe fall, and that caused a brain bleed from which she fell into a coma. The professionalism, the kindness, and the reassurance of the EMTs that day left a long-lasting impression on me. Inspired, I trained for years to become an EMT and actually began responding to emergency calls. I treated each patient as well as their family with the respect and the dignity that they deserved. However, due to my immigration status, I am barred from obtaining the Maryland EMT license, despite having met all the requirements to get my EMT license, as well as the firefighting license, and being allowed to serve in other states. This bill proposes a solution that allows qualified individuals like myself to contribute to our state's emergency response system. It's not about individual exemptions. It's about expanding the qualified pool of EMS providers in Maryland. And we face a growing demand for EMS providers, as well as providers in Maryland. It represents potential life saves. It doesn't lower standards, but it leverages the skills and the dedication of individuals who have already chosen to serve their communities. This bill will strengthen Maryland's emergency response system. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Thank you. We have one virtual, but before I do that, any questions for this panel? No questions. So, Senator Ellis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for this bill. As a fellow immigrant, I kind of know a lot what you're talking about. I came here at a young age also to this country. So I'm curious, what can you do, Ms. Ferris Cruz, as far as working as a paramedic? Can you drive a vehicle?
If I get my EMT license, I'd be able to work as an EMT, drive a vehicle, drive the squad. If I'd get. Yeah.
So you have like a driver's license,
yes,
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Sorry.
issued by the driver's license issued by
Maryland.
The state of Maryland.
Yes.
Okay, so you have other licenses, yeah, and so this is another license which you would love to get.
Yes,
true?
Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And now we're going to hear from Lou Kaufman.
Okay, trying to unmute. Thank you. I'm speaking today as president of the Wheaton Volunteer Rescue Squad and on behalf of one of our members, Melanie Perez Cruz. Melanie joined the squad in 2019 when she was 16 years old. Since then, she has completed high school and has earned an associate degree from Montgomery College. She has completed the University of Maryland's Emergency Medical Technician and firefighter training at the Montgomery County Public Service Training Academy. The Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, the licensing agency for EMTs, will not issue a license as she is in the United States illegally, does not have a social security number, and has no work permit. Madeline arrived from El Salvador with her family in 2008 when she was 5 years old. She had no idea of her immigration status until MIMS denied her EMT license. She has sought assistance from multiple agencies and attorneys. She is not eligible for DACA as she arrived after June 15th, 2007. She has been advised that to become a legal immigrant, she should return to El Salvador for a year and then have a legal relative sponsor her return to the United States. I've had the pleasure of knowing Madeline since 2019 as we are on the same duty shift. She is pleasant, helpful, always on time, dressed in uniform, and participates in all activities. Although she's not an EMT, she is able to provide emergency patient care under the supervision of a licensed EMT, and she assists in training our new members and has proven to be an excellent clinician. Please find a path for Madeline, who has proven her ability to function and serve as a productive citizen of our community, a means to obtain her Maryland EMT license and continue to serve the citizens of Maryland. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for this witness? Thank you. So Madeline, I have one question for you. What's in your future?
Well, if God allows, hopefully I get to become as well like a GAM, a paramedic, and a firefighter.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for your service. If there are no other questions, that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 374. Thank you, Senator Wallstreicher.
Thank you.
Next, we have Senate Bill 347, Senator McKay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I bring up my panel? Or have some people?
One signed in, but you, Senator McKay.
Really?
Yeah, it's really, I only have you.
I would have made a mistake. I apologize that we didn't get Mr. Brandon Butler. Is it okay?
Just one?
Just
Okay.
if is that okay?
It is, but in the future, please be sure you're
I-
signing up your witnesses.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. We'll be as brief as possible. We know that your time is valuable. Senate Bill 347 is a bill that you heard last year. It did not get passed. However, what 347 does, it expands the caregiver definition to administer medical cannabis when designated caregiver is not available. There are some safeguards. This particular caregiver cannot administer more than 5 patients. As we find out more benefits out of medical cannabis and the ability to administer it, we need to expand. And that's what Senate Bill 347 will do. Look forward to a favorable report. Mr. Brandon Butler.
Thank you. We did find Mr. Butler on the written only, so he's not totally unregistered, but thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the indulgence and we'll make sure that that's corrected next time. For the record, my name is Brandon Butler, Pinnacle Strategies on behalf of Grow West Maryland, and you have the written testimony. This bill really provides parity for the codified language already in statute for school personnel. It already allows for school personnel to administer medical cannabis. While the adult use market has opened up access, there still needs to be a focus on vulnerable populations. So the current caregiver regulations, as the senator pointed out, can limit access to medical cannabis. And that's why this is recommended, or that is recommended by a certified physician. And so working with the Maryland Cannabis Administration, again, to align the measure that is already provided for school personnel. And so you also have the written testimony of Susan Valois, the president of Grow West. We urge a favorable consideration. Thank you.
Do I have any questions for Senator Washington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, 2 questions. One, Brandon, why didn't you sign up properly? No, I'm joking. The real question is, can you just, I know this is an important bill, but why do we absolutely need this?
Sure. And Senator, I think this gives us an opportunity to provide medical cannabis in the or in the nursing home space, in the assisted living space. There are over 600 assisted living facilities in the state of Maryland. What happens under the caregiver regulations that limits the patient to a number of I believe it's only 2 caregivers that can then provide the medical cannabis to the patient. So if that caregiver is off sick, or if he or she is not available or is assisting others, then that limits the access to this recommended from a certified physician.
And this can already happen in schools, you said?
Yes, sir. So it's already been codified under Maryland statute for several years now.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any other questions for this panel? That ends the hearing to Senate Bill 347. Thank you. Next, we have Senator Bailey, Senate Bill 158. Senator Bailey, do you have a panel or someone, Anthony Jerome? Is Anthony with you?
I do not see him,
Okay.
but I do know that we have some people that we're trying to get on electronically.
We do. We have
Okay.
we have 3 virtual witnesses.
Okay,
Thank you.
you ready, Madam Chair? Okay, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the members of the committee. Senator Bailey for the record, representing St. Mary's and Calvert County, District 29. Today, I'd like to talk to you about Senate Bill 158. This would restore local control over zoning requirements for cannabis facilities that were licensed but were not operational until October 1, 2022. Last year's cannabis reform legislation included provisions limiting local control over zoning decisions relating to cannabis facilities. These provisions have had a significant detrimental effect on the efforts of my constituents who live near a cannabis facility that has been built in the critical area with plans to future expand in Able in a very rural part of St. Mary's County known as the 7th District. The 7th District community came together to share their many concerns. Through their efforts, these citizens were able to secure concessions regarding to the construction and operations of the cannabis facility, which would need to be enforced through the county's zoning process. So I want to just give you just a little history. In 2018, they applied to get a facility. And there's no doubt about it. The residents of this area did not fight the fact that there was going to be medical marijuana. They actually openly welcomed it. They were given the idea and the opportunity that it was going to be very similar. A bunch of us have Bell Nursery greenhouses in our area. And that's what it looked like. And they were the pictures. And what happened was they got permitted and the process started. Then the process came, it went through local zoning. And because of that, our local zoning determined it to be agriculture. Because it was going to be agriculture, it was not, it was allowed to go ahead and pass as agriculture without the local zoning ordinances. When that occurred, all of a sudden it changed and it became a very large structure that was built right in the critical area. Now, St. Mary's County started having a bunch of hearings and they came out and they said, you know what? Even though the plans were to build this structure much larger and to have it as a multi-building facility, they went ahead and said, wait a minute. The county stepped in and said, this is not possible. Now, the only reason that I'm here today is the fact that when we passed the bill last year, it came in and it had a date on it that said if they'd had a permit to build before, then they weren't required to have a zoning. They weren't required to follow the zoning. And that's the one misrepresentation in last year. The county had already handled this. It wasn't going to be able to be built bigger in this critical area. And with the change in the law, and so that's why we've brought this bill, is to say that you might hear some of the people say some of the hard things that have happened to this area. It's not to say that they're opposed to the facility that is there right now. What they're opposed to is that facility getting larger and having a more detrimental effect on their area. And that's why I'm here today, and that's why they are here today. Because we definitely respect the concerns about how local zoning policies can add to the regulatory burden facing our Maryland businesses. However, this enactment, as I said, of last year's legislation had no effect on whether this facility would move forward or not. It would have been built with or without the provisions being enacted by the state. The residents of the 7th District and their local representatives used this process that was available to them to work with the owner of a facility on a compromise to address their concerns. And that was all done, right? But what we enacted last year through the attorneys undid this process. State law should not take away the opportunity that they deserve to move forward under the reasonable conditions that were set forth by the county. I want to briefly address the Maryland Cannabis Administration's letter of information on this bill. The term operational in this provision of law appears to be open to interpretation, as counsel for the state has interpreted it completely different than that of the St. Mary's County attorneys and the way that they understand it. I want to recognize the Cannabis Administration staff for the open dialogue that we and representatives from St. Mary's County have had regarding this bill and this issue. And I appreciate everybody's concern and willing to listen. I believe the lack of clarity around the specific wording of this provision shows the difficulty that our local government has in addressing the zoning issues surrounding this one cannabis facility. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 158. I thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator. Do I have any questions from our other senators? Not at this time. We do have 2 unfavorables. So we'll bring them up and then we'll do the virtuals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Matt Boley and William Sullivan. Matt, you want to start, please?
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Matthew Boley of RWL Law here on behalf of Story of Maryland in opposition to SB 158. I've spoken with Senator Bailey on this matter and will continue to work with him on the issues pertaining to this. I appreciate his willingness to work together on these matters. We do not believe that granting the counties more authority to have the ability to set different standards of review for this industry will be a positive development for the state or the industry. If counties are given greater authority to restrict any segment of the cannabis ecosystem, it will result in less access and more opportunity for Marylanders and Maryland businesses and potentially create a patchwork system. Over the last year, Story has proactively worked with its neighbors, local elected officials, and other stakeholders to be more communicative and responsive to neighbor concerns, and will continue to act in that manner. Story has met with local officials, set up an email address for community members to raise concerns and ask questions. Story has worked toward hosting a local community forum with the surrounding neighbors and will continue to make a strong effort to be the best neighbor possible. I urge an unfavorable report on SB 158.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Sullivan, Executive Vice President of Operations for Story. I appreciate this opportunity to speak on behalf of Story Cannabis, a lifelong Marylander who lives in the western region of the state. Story strives to be a great leader and member of the community. We have continued to place the community environment at the top of our decisions while implementing precise operational standards. To support these objectives, we have installed energy efficient and sound efficient mechanical equipment, providing multiple staging to reduce both sound and unnecessarily equipment operating. In addition, we have placed a continuous precaution surrounding odor, constructing our systems in a manner to be closed loop, preventing infiltration to the atmosphere of flavonoids found in any plants. In any agriculture operation, irrigating plants is a mandatory event. Through this event, a standard utilization of purified water and salts are mixed and sourced to the plants. To dismiss a misconception that has been mentioned with respect to our facility, the facility does not dispel any runoff into a nearby creek. In fact, we have designed our operation to capture any possible runoff leached from plants to storage tanks, which in turn are transferred to Wayne's drains and septic, disposing of it at Mattawoman Wastewater Treatment Plant in Charles County, providing no chance of infiltration of the environment and is in compliance with state requirements related to our water filtration. The cannabis industry provides great employment opportunities across the state. For example, the operation of our multiple facilities, we are proud to say that we provide hundreds of jobs to local communities, and that number rises to thousands when you consider the ancillary to our grow operation. To dispel another misconception, the MCA mandates strenuous employment approvals consisting of fingerprinting and background checks for all individuals to become licensed to work in the industry. If an individual meets the MCA's criteria, they will be approved and provided an agent badge. All of our employees we employ have followed these protocols and passed the applicable background checks. As an operator since the inception of this industry and a native of the state, I believe requiring a special use to cannabis facilities and industry places an unfair restriction which will in turn negatively impact our community and hinder access to employment and affordable medicine. I thank the Senate Finance Committee for your time and respectfully urge an unfavorable report of this litigation.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Senator Ellis, you have questions?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for testimony. So what story, there's no written testimony, as I was looking at, what story is a group or it's a company?
This is a company.
It's a company.
Yes, sir.
What does the company do?
It cultivates, processes, and retails cannabis for medical and adult use.
Cultivates and distribute.
Yes.
So it doesn't process?
We process into a finished good of flower form, not in an extraction form in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, and you mentioned the facility in my district, the Mattawoman wastewater plant.
Yes,
so
sir.
that means you're located in Charles County?
That is correct.
Okay, we're in Charles County.
Able
Farms, okay.
So just for clarity, Able in St. Mary's County, it's the wastewater, I think the wastewater is taken, is correct, to Charles County.
Correct. Apologies.
Okay, well, okay, so I thought I knew everything in my district, so I was like wondering what's going on here.
Yeah, no.
So your operation is in St. Mary's County?
Yes, sir.
So why do you have to take your wastewater to Charles County?
Due to the restrictions of the site and septic capacities, we collect all of any runoff that leaches from the plants and then dispose of that at Mattawoman. Okay, man.
So don't St. Mary's, I know St. Mary's have wastewater plants too, like in Lexington Park. Why don't you take it down there?
It was just contracted through our contractor that comes to pick that up, and that is his preferred disposal area.
Okay, well, thank you for
Not a problem.
clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a couple of questions. Are you in a critical area? Your business is located in a critical area?
Yes, ma'am.
And that wasn't part of the issue why you were denied, or, I mean, you had a permit before we,
That is correct.
okay. And what's your current size and what are you trying to grow to?
So our current size is roughly 34,000 square foot of flower canopy. At this time, we do not have any imminent plans to expand and are happy with the size that we are at.
So is the bill just trying to stop you from expanding, just in case you want to expand? Is that?
That is correct.
How much could you expand? What's the additional property that you have?
So under the MCA, we had a pre-approval for an additional 70,000 square foot.
Okay. Can you put that in acres for me? Is it 20,000 square foot an acre?
I would need a little.
We'll make sure to follow up and get you that conversion.
And if we pass this bill, would it affect other growers?
It would.
This is a statewide bill.
I understand, but I just didn't know if there's
Yes,
anyone
ma'am.
else in the same position.
It would, I believe, impact other operators throughout the state in their ability to continue to expand their business and provide the medicine.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so we're gonna go to the virtual witnesses. Oh, Senator Washington, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
It's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my understanding is that, so if you wanted to expand, if this bill passes, they can cap your expansion if they wanted to.
That is correct.
And they can say through zoning ordinance, they can say this site here cannot grow more than what it currently is and stalemate it essentially.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It seems like the neighbors around are, I mean, look, this General Assembly approved a lot of these licenses, right? And there's so many places that they can go. And then at some instance, we're gonna have some of these where we have 100 and potentially in one county. Is there, because this proposal is trying to, if they wanted to, they can limit it if they wanted to under this proposal, if they wanted to. If this bill doesn't pass, could they still limit the distance between each one of the dispensaries? If this bill does pass? If the bill doesn't, you wouldn't know the answer.
I'm not
Okay,
sure of
never
that.
mind.
I'll make sure to get back to you.
The other question, and I'm reading the testimony here, it mentions something about the smell or odor of the cannabis at the growing facilities, at the facilities. Can you just speak to that? Is that an issue at your site or at multiple of these sites? Where that becomes an issue with the neighbors and that's why they want to make sure they limited it?
Yeah, so as any plant, right, they produce flavonoids. And so what we've done is we've designed this building, right, to be a closed loop system. That way it is not sourcing any exterior air, and it's not releasing any exterior air. Through the years, I think I've built about 40 of these nationally. And so I've learned a lot of practices to then, really consolidating, the odor emitted through the growing process to inside of the building.
Got it. And what about the dispensaries? Is that the same type kind of concept as well?
That is correct. Dispensaries are typically in a sealed package. So there is a reduction to odor, but there still is the odor. So typically vault areas, right, they're where you're storing mass amounts of product are in closed loop systems.
Yeah, because I hear this all the time from my seniors in my community that they don't want that smell.
Yeah.
And it seems like the folks that live in this area also don't want that smell too. That seems to be the big issue that happens here. But thanks for answering my question.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. The testimony was about the location. Is the facility, I haven't seen a map. I don't know if it's in the testimony of where it's located. Are you in the critical area right now?
We are. Yes, sir.
You are. And so, so with the way the law was drafted, would you have to, or do you have to comply with the requirements of the critical area laws?
We do.
You do. And so you've already met those requirements with the original footprint that's currently there.
That is correct.
And you're proposing to expand that footprint under the law change with last year's law, but in compliance with all the requirements of the critical area laws?
Yeah, we were proposing to not be restricted from the capability of expanding while still meeting all of those requirements.
Say that again.
We would be proposing of not being restricted to expand while still maintaining the requirements, the needed requirements for a critical area.
Say it again for you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we are, looking to not be restricted to expand while still meeting the requirements of a critical area.
Right. So you do not want to expand. You want to expand, right?
We're trying, I think the goal is to preserve the right to expand
Preserve
under the capacity that they have.
But in compliance with the critical area laws.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem.
So if I could just clear that up, that's the whole reason the bill is here, right? And with all due respect, Senator, about your question about neighbors and things like that, right? This facility was built in the critical area. It was not a facility, anything like anyone has ever seen in the critical area, right? It is right up against the water and it is a huge industrial building. That is the issue. It was allowed to be built there because it had agricultural zoning. The county addressed this. Once everyone saw what existed in this 35,000 square foot building built right up against the estuary of the Potomac River, right? That's when everyone said, wait a minute. And all the elected officials in St. Mary's County came together and they passed zoning ordinances to say, wait a minute, this can't happen in our critical area. There's absolutely no other building that can be built like this, right? We in St. Mary's County are the original stewards of the Chesapeake Bay and the Potomac River watershed, right? That is what we do. This building is in direct conflict with everything that we do, but we're fine with it. And we addressed it through our local laws. And what we did was we said, that's fine, it's there, but you just can't expand. The whole issue that happened last year with the one provision of the law that said if you had a license prior, you were licensed prior to October 1, 22, which they did have a license, allows them to say, wait a minute, zoning no longer applies. So now that everyone knows that they are industrial, it is a processing facility, they can then build 2 more buildings just as big as this one right in the critical area. That is the whole reason that we are here. We are not here to limit marijuana in the state of Maryland. We are not here to say we don't want it next door. Obviously, some of the people that are here don't want it right next door. But what they don't want to do is have this rural area right up against the Chesapeake Bay in our estuary, all of a sudden get 2 more of these facilities right next door. You can't build anything else there. We should not be able to build an industrial building right on the shore of the rivers in sight of St. Clements Island. This makes no sense. I implore you to work with me on this bill, and I thank you very much.
So, Senator Bailey, if I can ask, when the county approved this, I looked at the picture. It's a huge building and it's a huge parking lot. Why would the county have even approved this in a critical area?
So the reason that they approved it in 2018 was they approved it when they were originally, and I can get all the original documents, the pictures, and I even helped support it. We all did, because we were shown an outdoor marijuana grow and some greenhouses just like the Bell Nursery. That is what it was sold to the county that it was going to be.
But somewhere along the line, the county issued permits to allow this.
So Madam Chair, agriculture is exempt. So when it was deemed that because of what they were going to do was going to be outdoor and a small greenhouse area that was going to be marijuana that was agriculture, that is when they decided, the county said, no problem, it's an agricultural facility, right? If you wanted to have built a tobacco barn there, if tobacco was still one of our crops, you would have been able to build a tobacco barn there. And that is what happened in a rural area. We're all set up for farming. That's what we're supposed to do. And there's only a few exceptions. But if anybody wants to tour this facility, you'll see that it's not an agricultural concept with anything that I've been familiar with.
The last time I toured a cannabis facility, I smelled like cannabis for 3 or 4 days. So I'd rather not do that again. Senator Mouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, our district, we have Dorchester County we have the entire Dorchester County is in our district. That's more shoreline than any other county in the country, So I'm very familiar. When I heard critical area, I thought I'd strike a nerve. I didn't realize I was going to play a song with it, but, with along those lines, so is there any other location where you can operate? Can you have another, like a remote facility in another place? Have you considered that?
So the MCA restricts you to one site for the license. So under the grower license, you are only allowed to house that at one location.
Right. But if there were a way to have another site where you weren't in the critical area and it were more workable, would that be an alternative for you?
I think it would have to be something that we took a look at from a business case. to add the additional supportive areas right outside of just growing the plant itself, would require other requirements to go along with it.
I've gone way over my time. Last one is, when would you expand? In 5 years, 10 years, or next year?
Honestly, we have no intimate plans to expand. Really that is a determination of the market, and the requirements of the market. So there is no timeline that's been set. It's more of being able to reserve the right to, should the business deem.
Yeah, thanks for answering all my questions.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Senator Ellis, did you change your mind? Thank you. So no other questions for this panel. We're going to go to the 3 virtuals, and we'll start with Kimberly Gibson.
Hi, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me okay?
Kimberly, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay, let me see. I apologize. I'm on my mobile device. Let me see if I can get it to connect. It won't allow me to turn my video on. Am I still able to give verbal testimony?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I thank you for this opportunity to testify in favor of Senate Bill 158. The 52,000 square foot industrial cannabis warehouse erected at the entrance to my neighborhood has significantly changed the rural nature of our small town, the one that I have grown up in since birth, the one that I've come to love. I've lived off of the same road for 38 years. I currently live in the home that my father was raised in, the one that my grandparents built in 1959. This was the reason that I did not move away when I got married. My husband and I felt this quiet road was the perfect place to raise a family. We had dreams of continuing to raise our young children here, but gone are the days of serene quiet and fresh air. These are treasured qualities that I used to enjoy at my property that I will never get back. There is not a day that goes by that we do not hear the buzzing of the 20+ air compressor units or smell the stench of marijuana in the air. There is now an industrial commercial operation and properly placed in the critical area. The warehouse is located on the same tributary where I enjoy fishing and crabbing with my children. This tributary connects directly to the Potomac River. It is located in an area where the road is not substantial enough to handle the influx of traffic to the facility. It is located where public water and sewer are not available. I am not providing this testimony because I am opposed to what marijuana is. I worked as a hospice nurse for 10 years and saw patients benefiting from symptom management with its use. I am giving my testimony because the improperly placed industrial warehouse affects the ability of able residents to enjoy their property without being burdened. We never had an opportunity to participate in a public hearing prior to this monstrosity being erected. There were no studies done, no informational sessions. It wasn't required because it was agriculture. And now any effort on behalf of citizens since the completion leaves us with dead-end phone calls, going back and forth with finger pointing between the county and the state. If we decide we can no longer stay in our homes because of the effects, what loss will we suffer because of the decrease in property value?
Kimberly,
Please
thank you. Kimberly, thank you. You've passed your time, but thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Robert Brown. Is he on?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you.
Okay, wait a second.
Okay.
If I can find the.
There you are. Thank you, Robert. We can see you and hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay. My name's Robert T. Brown. I'm president of the Maryland Watermen Association. And first of all, I'd like to have a favorable and appreciate the chair and members of the committee for giving me a few moments. This industrial complex of 52,000 square feet, 119 parking places, 22 climate controlled trailers, which are about 40 foot long, are in a critical area. Okay, all of the non-purpose services we have there, stormwater will be dumping into Canoe Neck Creek. At the mouth of that creek, we've got aquaculture, Worcester Lease Bottom. Right now, at the mouth of the creek is polluted, closed for pollution down to the mouth, just about at the mouth of the creek. And some of the aquaculture ground starts about 600 foot from that. So if we have any more input on it and we don't know what's going to happen with all the stormwater and stuff, it could interfere with our operation of aquaculture into that area. These areas are to be protected for the Chesapeake Bay. Many of the homeowners in St. Mary's County who live on the water in critical areas have wanted to have additions, porches, sidewalks, gazebos, and so on their property. They cannot get this unless they have a public hearing. Plus, many of them are denied that. Yet this 52,000 industrial complex, parking lot, etc., is being put in to the critical areas. I also want to talk to you about the groundwater. They claim they're going to recycle the groundwater. They were supposed to have 2,800 gallons per day, 7 days a week. That will be 1,960 per month, 1,019,200 gallons per year that they'll be drawing out of the ground. Right now, they got a tractor trailer going there 6 days a week, taking loads out, and another on Saturdays, they're taking 2 loads out. We have grave concerns about our our groundwater and our plants. And
Mr. Brown, thank you. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Thank
I
you.
want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. And finally, we have Michelle Crocus Long for favorable with amendment.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Senators. I'm Michelle Caracas Long, an able resident since 2017. I work incredibly hard to live here, and I have a right to enjoy my property and the outdoors. But depending on the day and the way the wind blows, I don't have that luxury because of the able cannabis growing and processing facility. The odor and air pollution that's produced by that facility and operations is downright disgusting. And not one person can tell me exactly what I'm breathing, how this byproduct affects air quality if it releases anything into the land, since we are in a critical area. I don't even live next door to this facility either. I live approximately 1 mile away from this facility, and yet I am directly and negatively impacted by the highly offensive odor that originates from there. More recently, the unpleasant humming and buzzing noise from the operation has made it to my home as well. And at what point does this stop? My home should be a happy refuge, but now it's one that forces me indoors because of odor and sounds. And yes, while an open dialogue with Story and community outreach has been great, at no point has it been implemented any mitigating factors to reduce the smell or sounds. We are promised things to come in the future, but they've been in operation this long, and as of 7:19 this morning, I could still smell it. I am in favor of Senate Bill 158, but with amendments. Based on my understanding on how this bill relates to the change in regards zoning and requirements, I suggest adding additional language for some reference to identify what specific government body, be it state or county, that has jurisdiction and authority to officially handle the related enforcement actions and/or sanctions, to include nuisance complaints resulting from the cannabis operation before and after the condition of stage 1 approval, pre-approval for a license. The reason I bring this up is based on my own personal experience. Currently, there is a loophole created between county and state laws, resulting in neither government body being able to assist or officially taking action regarding nuisance-related complaints based on the cannabis operation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for Michelle? Thank you. I see no other questions. So this ends the hearing on Senate Bill 158.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm registered as an oral speaker. I'm sorry to interrupt.
What's your name, sir?
Anthony Damron.
You were called. I guess you weren't here
I
yet.
was having trouble with the
right.
instruction and getting.
Come up. 2 minutes, please, Mr. Damron. Thank you.
Ma'am. So I live directly next to the giant industrial facility. I've lived there for 30 years. I wanted to tell you that I am a single father. I have joint custody of my 2 daughters under Maryland law, which should tell you that I'm a competent person. So imagine you spend a weekend with your children, and then you have someone say something to you a day later about your children smelling like pot. And as a single father, do you understand the repercussions that can have for someone on whether they get to see their children? And there's nothing in this world that means anything more to me than the safety and well-being of my children and being able to spend my little downtime with them. We've been here for 30 years. My father, not a rich man by any means, worked hard, sacrificed a lot of his life to procure that land for us so we have a future. We're on well water with the same aquifer. They're taking 10,000 gallons a day out. 750 plants were found there in 2019 prior to a license being granted in 2022. For federal law, 500 plus plants is a 5-year minimum sentence. But what did we do? We gave them a license 3 years later anyway. I personally had a police, 4 police in 2020, these same police that next door protect the cartel, detained me in my driveway because they said a vehicle smelled like pot. Well, it's kind of obvious it's going to smell like pot when you have thousands of plants next door. I've done everything I can. I've tried to be civil. I've tried to do everything legally. I have an open appeal against these people. During the appeal, they install the septic tank that we're appealing. They don't care. It doesn't matter what they say. The smell is horrible. The noise drives me crazy. I can't have my windows open at night. I go to work and they say I smell like pot. It's ridiculous. Citing Supreme Court decision 21-454, Sackett versus the EPA, the runoff retention pond runs across our property lines. So according to that Supreme Court decision, the EPA cannot and the MDE cannot grant this facility the license to dump across our property lines.
Mr. Dameron, we'll see if there's any questions for you. Thank you for your
Thank you,
testimony.
ma'am.
I don't know what you do about the smell. This bill is not going to stop the current operation, and it's not going to stop that smell. So I don't want you to have higher expectations, even if we pass the bill.
Well, you do what you need to do. I'll do what I need to do.
No. I don't know, Senator Bailey. Do I have any other questions for Mr. Dameron? No. Thank you. I'm glad you got the opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So that does end the hearing on Senate Bill 158. Thank you, Senator Bailey.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Senate Bill 332, Hospitals and Urgent Care Centers Sepsis Protocol, is Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Madam
There you
Chair.
are.
Good afternoon and good afternoon.
You want to
Madam
bring your
Vice
panel
Chair.
up?
Yes, please. Thank you. And members of the Finance Committee, for the record, as the chair stated, I am Senator Karen Lewis Young from District 3, Frederick. And I have with me today a panel of healthcare experts, as well as the mother of Lachlan, who this bill is named after, 5-year-old boy who passed away due to a lack of an ability to detect sepsis. But I want to introduce one other individual who is with us today for moral support, the president of the Frederick County Council, Brad Young. So with that, I would like to first explain what sepsis is. It's a serious and potentially life-threatening condition caused by the body's overwhelming immune response to infection. Any virus, bacteria, fungal infection, or wound could lead to sepsis. Sometimes it's known as blood poisoning. Sepsis results when the immune chemicals released in the bloodstream cause widespread inflammation, leading to blood clots. It impairs blood flow and oxygen and nutrient deprivation in the organs. Sepsis can result in permanent organ damage, cognitive impairment, physical disability, and all too frequently, death. I want to scope out quite how vast the problem is in our country as well as in our state. More than 1.7 million people in the U.S. develop sepsis every year. 350,000 Americans die each year from sepsis, so that's roughly 1 in 5. 75,000 children in the US are hospitalized every year with severe sepsis, resulting in 7,000 deaths. Sepsis kills almost twice as many Black Americans as white Americans, so it's a health equity issue as well. Sepsis is the 9th leading cause of death in Maryland, ranking above flu and pneumonia and breast cancer and opioids and AIDS, and the list goes on. So what is early detection of sepsis? Well, it's the rapid diagnosis and management of sepsis, which is critical to successful treatment. The sepsis patient is usually already critically ill and requires immediate attention to avoid rapid deterioration. Nearly 80% of all sepsis cases actually begin outside of a hospital or an emergency setting. Therefore, that's why it's so necessary to treat the patient at the very same time they enter and confirm the diagnosis and locate the origin of the area of infection. Failure to recognize early warning signals of sepsis it results in slower treatment and, unfortunately, fatal consequences. Early detection works, and we have some data on that. Mortality rates increased by 8% for every hour it goes untreated. So do the math, 10 hours times 8, that's an 80% chance. The mortality rate of sepsis, I mentioned overall, it's about 26%, but it can vary by region, by state, from 20 to 50%. And that rate is really largely dependent on how quickly patients are diagnosed and treated with powerful antibiotics to battle the bacteria that's racing through the patient's system. Experts believe that 80% of sepsis deaths could be treated if diagnosed in time. So let me tell you specifically, given all that background, what this bill does. It will require hospitals to implement a standard protocol for handling sepsis and provides appropriate training for staff. The protocol will include a process for screening and early recognition of sepsis, severe sepsis or sepsis shock. It also provides guidelines for treatment for both adults and children, including treatment timelines. And finally, it requires hospitals to collect data on the recognition and treatment of severe sepsis for the purpose of internal quality improvement. So how can these sepsis protocols affect early detection? Well, as I've mentioned, it requires urgent treatment, including the administration of antibiotics, fluids, and other interventions. The protocols actually outline the steps and the timeframes for initiating these interventions, and it helps healthcare providers to act swiftly and effectively. They establish a standardized approach to sepsis management, ensuring that healthcare providers follow evidence-based practices and guidelines. This consistency also helps in delivering timely and appropriate care across different healthcare settings, because an emergency room at a hospital might not be the only setting. Sepsis protocols contribute to increased education and awareness among all healthcare providers. They promote ongoing training and updates on sepsis management, ensuring that healthcare professionals are knowledgeable about the latest best practices. As I mentioned, It also enables data collection and monitoring of sepsis cases, allowing institutions to track their performance, identify areas of improvement, and implement corrective action. Now, a number of states have already implemented similar sepsis protocols as to what we are recommending today. I won't go through all the states, but I will mention one state that was really the first to enact sepsis protocols, and that was New York State back in 2013. So 11 years later, they have some experience, they have some data. In their first 30 months of implementation, Rory's regulations in New York State reduced the odds of dying for adult sepsis patients by 21%. Sepsis mortality for pediatric patients in the state was reduced by 40% when protocols were correctly administered. In 2022, the New York State Department of Health reported that mandatory sepsis protocols in the state had actually saved 16,000 lives in 5 years. So why should Maryland do it now? I hope I've made that case, but our rate of sepsis mortality is higher than 35 other states in the nation. And in Maryland, sepsis was the 9th leading cause of death. And the rate of sepsis is actually rising. Sepsis is also the most expensive condition in US hospitals, costing $62 billion annually. It's also the most expensive condition billed to Medicare. The cost of sepsis is increasing annually of a rate of about 12%. A single hospital in New York implemented a sepsis campaign in 2010, resulting in a savings of $740,000 for 153 severe sepsis patients. One regional hospital system reported saving $38 million annually after instituting these protocols. Finally, to improve sepsis management and reduce its burden, the World Health Assembly and World Health Organization in 2017 adopted a resolution that urged governments and healthcare workers to implement appropriate measures to address sepsis. Sepsis should be considered a medical emergency, and increasing the level of awareness is essential. Thank you for your time and attention, and I urge you to support this potentially life-saving legislation. Panel.
Like to go next.
Thank you. I'll go first.
I just remind you all, we have a 2-minute limit, so please honor that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Tom Heyman. I'm the president and CEO of Sepsis Alliance. We're a national patient advocacy organization. And as you've heard, sepsis is common, it's expensive, and it's deadly. In fact, more children die of sepsis than die of cancer. And now globally, more people die of sepsis than of cancer. It is a public health crisis and a medical emergency. About 40% of patients who are lucky enough to survive are back in the hospital within 90 days. 14,000 patients suffer amputations each year. It is a major healthcare concern. 1 in 3 people who die in a hospital will die of sepsis. We need to know about this and we need to do something about it. 1 in 3 of us statistically will get sepsis in our lifetimes, and 1 in 15 of us will die of it unless we do something about it. Lauchlin's law will provide life-saving sepsis protocols for hospital settings and urgent care, importantly. These protocols can and will save lives and limbs. Another vital component of the bill is education and training. We know from our surveys that only about half of first responders really have any capability to identify sepsis in the field. That's important because half of sepsis patients travel in an ambulance. So this is a really important element of the bill. Sepsis is fast moving, difficult to manage. Its symptoms can be easily confused, and that's why educating healthcare professionals is critically important. Sepsis Alliance has an institute that has trained over 45,000 healthcare professionals across the continuum of care and across the nation. These trainings enable clinicians to be able to rapidly identify, diagnose, and treat sepsis, resulting in better outcomes. When passed into law, Lauchlin's Law will address this problem throughout the state of Maryland. Comprehensive healthcare professional education and protocols will save lives and limbs. Sepsis is common, it's expensive, and it's deadly. Thank you for your time and for your opportunity to provide comments today.
Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hello, thank you. I am Dr. Barbara Brookmeyer, the Health Officer for Frederick County, and you have my written testimony. I will summarize that the components of this bill are the next reasonable step to the statewide initiatives that have had stalled improvement. So the local data that's publicly available that I'll be sharing is for septicemia, and that's defined as a serious bacterial infection with 3 primary complications: sepsis, septic shock, and acute respiratory distress syndrome. So as Senator Young had mentioned, in Maryland, septicemia was the 9th leading cause of death in 2021 in Maryland. And when we look at the mortality rate, comparing Maryland's rate to the US rate, we are higher than the average in the nation. So we know that it is possible to get to a lower rate. When we look at Maryland and we look at the racial disparities, the racial differences, there are stark differences. Black men die at greater rates than Black women, white men, and white women. Almost 2 times more, 2 times higher of a rate for Black men than white women. So in Frederick County, in 2021, 38 people died from septicemia, and that's more people than died from chronic liver disease or cirrhosis, more people than died from suicide, more people than had died from breast cancer or motor vehicle accidents. So while they're most commonly occurring in persons who are over age 55, they can occur at any age. And in 2021, in the whole state, there were 3 children under the age of 1 who had died from septicemia. So it affects all ages and it's throughout the state, but most significantly impacting persons who are Black, non-Hispanic, and deserves our attention.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here today and representing our son. Lachlan is the reason we are asking for this change. He lost his life to the misdiagnosis of sepsis stemming from influenza. Friday, January 17, 2020, he became symptomatic after stating leg cramps and a headache. By Sunday night, we took him to the urgent care because he took a turn for the worst. Seeking care at the top-rated urgent care due to stating that they provide emergency care. Inquiring several times if I should be there or go to our emergency department, they declined. Monday afternoon, January 20th, 2020, less than 12 hours after care, he passed away at our hospital. He was one of 9 pediatric deaths in 4 weeks in our county. The education policies and awareness did not just fail Lachlan, it failed us. They don't have to live with the weight and images forever with you of the last words, not being able to save your own child. Coming home to the brothers, telling them what happened, and seeing him in a coffin for the last time. Our story may be different if I was directed to go to the ED when they couldn't detect blood pressure, excruciating pain. No one should have to hold their child for the last time. This is to see that no one ever has to go through what we did for the future. Providing support, awareness, and prevention since he left us to become a mission. Working in collaboration with those in the state of Maryland and the nation to bring this to the light, saving as many lives as possible. We can't do this alone. I ask that you support this bill, not just for us, but for the state of Maryland.
Thank you for that testimony. Are you Brooke?
I am, sorry.
And I'm very sorry. had to be just an awful experience, and we're very sorry that it happened, but hopefully we can keep it from happening in the future. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the bill, Senator. I was wondering if Dr. Brookmeyer, if you can just, I'm looking at the unfavorable testimony, and I'm just going to read a line for you, and if you can just respond to it, I think it'd be great. It says, while it seems reasonable to have protocols for the early recognition and treatment of sepsis, do we really need a law for that? Can you respond to that?
Yes, I think it's established in the medical literature that protocols do in fact improve the quality of care that's provided. And when we're talking about a condition where, as you described, it's not only hours that matter, but minutes that matter for the early detection, that protocols help to standardize the care. And I would say that the protocols are not being dictated by this, what those protocols are. So it is open to the hospitals and the urgent cares determining their own protocol. And of course, there's always the opportunity for individual variation, customization based on the person who's in front of you. But it's about, with the protocols, the early identification of signs and symptoms that could potentially be indicating that sepsis is going on. So the sooner that we say in medicine, the differential diagnosis, that sepsis is in the differential diagnosis, the sooner that there can be additional examination and searching for that, as well as treatment and management, so that hopefully we can avoid limbs lost. Hopefully we can avoid deaths, and also potentially reduce the amount of pharmaceutical products that are needed if we can prevent somebody from getting really, really, really sick.
Dr. Brookmeyer, is sepsis the #1 injury that happens in hospitals?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure that it would actually be classified as an injury or even an iatrogenic cause of death. I'm not sure, but I would be happy to ask the Maryland Hospital
We have someone
Association.
coming up from the Maryland Hospital. I just thought maybe you knew
terrific.
that. Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. And I knew sepsis was an issue in hospitals, but I didn't know quite the level of mortality that it's such a leading cause. Maybe for Mr. Heyman, maybe I direct this question to. So, can you give me some examples of what this bill would do that isn't currently being done in hospitals? Like just at where the rubber meets the road. I understand there's some additional screening, but how would you know? Can you just describe what it might, if we passed this bill or something similar to it, if there may be some amendments or things, but what that would look like different than what it might look like now if I go to a hospital or urgent care for something?
Yeah, I think the big advantage is if you yourself or a loved one, you were to take to a hospital, sepsis would be very much on their radar. They'd understand that there is a protocol that they've developed, that they have in place, that it would include children. Now, CMS as a measure only includes adults. And I think more importantly is that at the urgent care, 87% of sepsis cases are present on admission to a hospital. 87% walk in or carried into the emergency department. That means the opportunity is really to move upstream and get this kind of education, training, and protocolization into urgent care, where many people are going first. All of us are going there first for the most part, and making sure that they are tuned in to the potential for a patient having sepsis.
Is it your contention? I do not mean this in a bad way, but is it your contention that people are developing sepsis when they go to, say, an urgent care, and then by the time they get to the hospital, where are we getting sepsis from? Is it I'm just trying to understand the chain of events. All right, anybody can answer, but since I'm talking with you, I'll ask you.
Yeah, I'll start and then defer to the doctor. But sepsis largely occurs in the community. So think of urinary tract infections, dental abscesses, tick bites that get 12-year-old boy scratching a mosquito bite until it becomes an open wound and requires quadruple amputation. True story.
And by the time you're in pain and going to the hospital, it's already there.
That's
or-
right.
yeah,
And it's
okay.
very often being missed on that first physical where sepsis is not on the radar given, and which is a shame given how common it
And
is.
it could be that I'm imagining that it may be even slightly more on the radar at a hospital than it is at an urgent care, like, but it maybe isn't enough, but certainly, especially as we, at that initial entry, it might be on the radar later in the process, but not, sometimes it's too late. It's obviously, it's too late.
Yeah, it's very often caught in the ICU, which is when you're really fighting to save life. And
And then it's all triage and you're just trying to do whatever you can. Okay.
that's right.
all
And a lot of expense comes in and a lot of overuse of antibiotics comes in at that point.
I had a relative that was they ended up having to give them very serious medications coming back to me that messed up other organs because they were trying to obviously save their life, and they did. But it's interesting. It's definitely, I know there's some opposition, but I think the opposition is more, hopefully we can work on it and see if we can work out how to make sure it works so we can get a handle on this. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming.
Do I have any other questions for this panel? Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for the bill. I have Pegeen Townsend, Jennifer Whitten, and Dana Kaufman. Senator, we had someone from the Health Department, Brian Morose, but you didn't bring him up with your panel. He's listed on your panel. Are you here, Brian? Yeah. Why don't you come up now then, please? I know that Brian and Jennifer and Dana are all favorable with amendments. So Pekeen, do you want to start?
I'm probably in that category too, but
Okay.
I will start. As the sponsor clearly indicated, sepsis is very serious and often fatal. We take this very, very seriously. And early recognition and intensive treatment is critical. We support this bill. We think uniform protocols make sense. Under this bill, however, it would be every hospital developing their own. We believe that a better source or solution is to link it to the CMS requirements so that it truly is uniform across the industry. That's one point. And the second point is, now I lost my second point. It's an important bill. I'm sorry. Here we go. Protocols change over time. And so if we link it to the CMS protocols, you get uniformity, and when things change, we're kept up to date.
Thank you. Jennifer, you want to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. For the record, Jennifer Whitten here representing LifeBridge Health for the first time. So again, we are very supportive of this piece of legislation. I just want to tell the family, I'm so sorry for your loss. So I kind of wear two hats today. I'm here representing 3 acute care hospitals and 1 freestanding medical facility, Grace Medical, and also we have a number of urgent care centers throughout the state of Maryland. So thinking about it from this perspective, I want to say that hospitals have very robust protocols related to sepsis care. So our issue with the legislation is not developing those protocols or having those. But as you all know, when we get prescriptive in statutory language and those protocols change, that creates a little bit of conundrum for us when those guidelines change on the clinical side. And they do change. The American College of Emergency Physicians and CMS release those protocols. And just last year, they did make some amendments to those guidelines. So we'd like to work with the sponsor to see if we can have some reference so that we can make sure that we're evolving when those guidelines change. And I would say for the urgent care center, some of the capacity, I think, and you'll hear from my colleague, Dana Kaufman, are all just a little different. We agree there should be protocols in place. We just need to make sure that there's some understanding about those capacities when we're doing that. So we're hoping that we can work with the sponsor and the advocates on finding the right approach, but generally very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dana Kaufman. I'm here on behalf of Patient First, who operates about 24 urgent care centers throughout the state of Maryland. We are in support of this bill with some amendments that have been given, I believe, to the sponsor. The biggest issue that we have is the fact that urgent care centers are not hospitals. We do not have the same resources and tools available to hospitals for the treatment and the identification of the source of the infection. But we are in strong support of the identification and the development of the protocols as well as the training. And that is the sense of the amendments that we have gotten, what we have given to the sponsors to limit the urgent care provisions for the identification and development of the protocols and for the training, because the other ones are more applicable to the hospital setting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Vidal, Vice Chair Klossmeyer, and committee members. For the record, my name is Brian Moroz. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the MDH Healthcare System and Operations for the Maryland Department of Health. I'm here today to speak in support of Senate Bill 332 with amendments. While the Maryland Department of Health supports the critical health initiatives within this bill, we are proposing clarifying amendments with the sponsors for special hospitals and urgent cares. Under the healthcare system, I oversee 11 facilities. 7 of those are special hospitals. They include our 5 adult psychiatric hospitals, such as Springfield, Spring Grove, Eastern Shore Hospital Center, Clifton T. Perkins, and Thomas B. Finan, and 2 long-term acute care hospitals, such as Western Maryland and Deer's Head Hospital. These special hospitals are defined in statute as providing specialized care, such as mental health services. This is as opposed to a general hospital, which provides services that are necessary for general medical and surgical care of patients. As written, Senate Bill 332 would have significant impact on the healthcare system's adult psychiatric facilities and long-term care hospitals because they are not equipped and staffed to treat and manage the patients with sepsis in-house. We propose amendments which would require special hospitals and urgent care centers to develop protocols that focus on early screening and detection of sepsis and require septic patients to be transferred to a hospital that can provide that appropriate level of care. In addition, the special hospitals and urgent care centers would be required to implement periodic training for specified staff and update staff on changes to the protocols and implement quality measures. MDH believes that these clarifying amendments will assure that the patients within special hospitals and urgent cares receive the appropriate level of care and treatment without subjecting the providers to clinical requirements outside of their scope of care. Thank you.
Brian, have you shared your proposed amendments with the sponsor?
We have.
Okay, so Senator, so are you working?
Yes, we are. And they make a very good point that in order to reduce the fiscal note, that it would be a whole lot more realistic to limit this bill and eliminate specialty hospitals, in particular mental health hospitals. But while I'm at the microphone, I do want to point out that the CMS requirements only apply to adults. They don't include children.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So you'll work with the amendments. Thank you very much. So we have 4 virtuals, 3 unfavorable and 1 favorable with amendment. So if there are no other questions for this panel, I'm going to go to the virtuals. Emily Tarso. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Emily, are you here? John Kelly and Esther Zabo. Let's see what you did. I didn't pick it up the way it was on paper. Emily Tarsel, John Kelly, and Esther Zabo. Okay. Emily, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm Emily Tarsell, a mother and a licensed therapist, and my heart goes out to the family who lost a child. I understand how they would find comfort in this bill because I too lost a child, and I find comfort in raising awareness to prevent others from losing children. And that's what brings me here today. And while it seems reasonable to have protocols for early recognition and treatment of sepsis, do we really need for that, as the Senator asked? Adequate treatment, according to the data that I gave you, a chart, shows that the incidence of sepsis in the U.S. is very low. And I'm somewhat concerned whether the pharmaceutical industry might see this as an opportunity to create fear with worldwide statistics. For example, pharma drove fear of HPV-related cancers by hyping worldwide statistics to scare us into getting HPV vaccines. So it turns out the rates of HPV cancers in the United States are less than 1%, and we already had safe and effective ways to prevent cervical cancer with Pap screening. So they tricked us, and my young, healthy daughter got the shots, and she died a few days later from shots she never needed. So now I'm wondering about the incidence of sepsis worldwide, that it might be hyped primarily to promote pharma products. According to studies, about 85% of sepsis cases occur in low-income countries, primarily among the elderly and those with compromised immune systems. So why are not we directing resources toward building stronger immune systems? So it seems to me the best way to deal with sepsis is to prevent it in the first place with a healthy immune system and education about infection prevention. I don't see any of that in the bill. And I'm concerned that pharma might exploit the vulnerable, the disadvantaged with unnecessary treatments, especially since it's not all laid out yet in the bill. And if there are not individualized protocols, I would encourage us to vote unfavorable for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have, I think, Esther.
Yes,
Thank you.
My name is Esther Sabo. I am also feeling with the family. I have 2 children myself, dear chair and members of the committee. This bill is supported by the Love of Lachlan Foundation, who we saw here, whose son died unfortunately in 2020 during a flu season of complications, flu complications that led to the sepsis. But Lachlan also was treated with Tamiflu after an urgent care visit. This bill is very condemnable, as who would want to see even one more child die at such a young age? However, one needs to look a bit further than just assume that the solution to the issue here is either vaccination against the flu, which the Lachlan Foundation now is supporting, or legislative solution with respect to sepsis. Lachlan was prescribed Tamiflu. Tamiflu's side effects, according to this study from Japan, which I have in my written testimony, includes death. The conclusion of this study: the data suggests Tamiflu use could induce sudden deterioration leading to death, especially within 12 hours of prescription. There were other websites that actually listed Tamiflu having side effects, even death. Many people who die of the flu, they're either were vaccinated or given Tamiflu. Kinley Sandwick, 8 years old from Maryland, died on Valentine's Day of 2020 of blood poisoning after being Tamiflu. Kaylee Roberts, 16 years old, dies from flu after being given Tamiflu. Lucy Kanani, 11 years old, dies from flu, got a flu shot 2 months prior, and dies after Tamiflu. This bill itself is for hospitals and urgent care centers to create diagnosis and treatment protocols for sepsis, both in children and adults. But today we don't have proper diagnosis, and this is also stated in the WHO site. We don't even have proper coding for sepsis. There are no cases, proper case numbers. There are many, many studies who are saying this. So some of the, unfortunately, I have more in my written proposals.
You have it in your written testimony.
So
Thank
I
you.
oppose the bill because it's not a full looking
Thank
at
you.
the whole issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this witness? I see no questions. I'm going to one more time call John Kelly. He was listed here as unfavorable. Is John here? Thank you. We are now going to go to the one virtual, Jill Capper, favorable with amendment. Still there?
Good afternoon. My name is Jill Capper, and I'm a lifelong resident of Maryland. It seems strange to me as well that we would have a required protocol be put into place by law, but there must be an option to opt out of doing so, I believe. During the last few years specifically, we witnessed how medical establishments murdered patient after patient based on protocols. So not all protocols are safe and effective, evidence-based or not. Time and time again, we see a one-size-fits-all approach, as if every patient is identical and has similar needs, but this is clearly not the case. I'm all about evidence-based medicine, but what is evidence-based to me may not be the same to you. So again, I'm just urging for amendments to be made where patients have the freedom to decide for themselves which evidence-based treatments they would like to pursue. That is all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 332. And we will now go to Senate Bill 403. Senator Klassmeyer, is she here? There. No. Senator Klassmeyer, I have your panel is Lori Doyle, Laurie Ann Spagnola, and Valerie Tuono. They'd like to come up. Senate Bill 403.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Senate Bill 403, Hospitals and Related Institutions, Residential Treatment Centers Accreditation. Members of this committee are likely aware of the challenges of our state is facing regarding emergency department boarding, hospitals, overstays, and emergency department wait times, specifically related to children. While there are no easy solutions to these complicated issues, one of the factors impacting children with serious emotional disorders is that these children often find themselves stuck in emergency departments or sent out of state due to the lack of available community placement, such as a residential treatment center, an RTC. In a memo dated December 15th, 2022, the Maryland Healthcare Commission noted that there are currently 6 RTCs operating 329 beds in Maryland. The supply of RTCs beds have been shrinking, with 3 facilities totaling 227 beds closing their doors in the last 7 years, a 41% reduction in the state's total bed capacity. Beds on the Eastern Shore and in Frederick were eliminated completely. Senate Bill 403 poses one solution to this issue by expanding the choice of accrediting bodies for the residential treatment centers, making it easier and more accessible for providers to open or expand units to serve these children in state and closer to family and community supports. Currently, Maryland statute recognizes only the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations as an approved accrediting body for RTCs. This is a policy dating back more than 20 years, when RTC services were offered only by hospitals. The federal government has long recognized the Commission of Accreditation Rehabilitation Facilities, CARF, and the Commission on Accreditation, COA, is appropriate to monitor RTCs. In fact, Maryland recognizes these same accrediting bodies for virtually all other behavioral health services lines, as well as intermediate care facilities. Many of Maryland's community-based behavioral health providers are CARF or COA accredited and have identified the Joint Commission limitation as a barrier to expanding services because they are faced with 3 choices. Become duly accredited. Accreditation is expensive in terms of both money and time, placing this option beyond the means of most providers. Number 2, become Joint Commission accredited only. Providers who have explored this option report that CARF better reflects their service focus on rehabilitation, while the Joint Commission exposes a more medical approach. given that most kids served in RTCs will return to the community with their families, a foster care placement, or a community program. Providers feel that the emphasis on rehabilitation is critical. Number 3, choose not to expand, which is the last 20 years is the route many have chosen, leading us to the shortage of our in-state placements we are facing today. Senate Bill 403 will align Maryland statute with federal standards and those of 49 other states and will provide more options for kids needing an RTC level of care. I urge a favorable report for Senate Bill 403.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Lori, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lori Doyle here on behalf of the Community Behavioral Health Association of Maryland in support of Senate Bill 403. As our sponsor said, this committee is well aware of the ED wait time issue in Maryland. And Madam Chair, I've had the opportunity to serve with you on the ED throughput group, and we've heard time and again this issue of ED boarders, of kids, particularly with serious emotional disorders, getting stuck because there's not an appropriate placement, which is usually an RTC. As our sponsor said, the Healthcare Commission has noted the 41% reduction in RTC beds over the past 7 years. It's clear that we need to attract new entrants into this market or to encourage expansion by those already in this market. And this bill is one way to help. It will simply align Maryland statute with federal standards that allow these other accrediting bodies. And our child serving organizations have told us that this is indeed a barrier to them getting into this work, because they either have to, again, get 2 different accreditations, one for their RTC product and one for all their other service lines, or they have to do all their service lines under the Joint Commission, which just doesn't meet the rehabilitation focus that they're looking for. So this is really a small but significant fix, and we hope you see fit to give it a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Val Tuano, and I'm here on behalf of Catholic Charities of Baltimore. We are urging support, a favorable report on SB 403 to increase the accreditation options for residential treatment centers in Maryland, similar to the choices that Maryland's outpatient behavioral providers have. As you may know, Catholic Charities is actually the second largest provider of behavioral health services in the state of Maryland. We operate a 55-bed licensed residential treatment center for children up to the age of 14. We are currently accredited by the Joint Commission, and we have no immediate plans to change that, although we would be open to having that option if it were available. We support the changes that have been proposed in this piece of legislation for the reasons so eloquently outlined by Senator Klausmeier and my colleague Lori Doyle. Most providers of congregate and outpatient services have historically chosen COA or CARF as their accrediting agency because they are viewed as being more focused on community-based providers, whereas the Joint Commission is much more focused on medically based providers, namely since they are the accrediting agency for hospitals in Maryland. When RTCs were initially required to be accredited, they were lumped in with hospitals because there really was no other option. More recently, accreditation has become a requirement for licensure for many levels of care, so providing a choice of accrediting bodies has become standard practice across the country. The lack of choice is not related to one being more rigorous than the other. It simply grew out of historical practice. And one of the limiting factors, as noted by Lori Doyle, in growing the network of RTC providers is the reluctance to become accredited by the Joint Commission rather than be able to stay with their current accrediting agency. This law would open the door to other providers being willing to provide this critical level of service in Maryland. And for these reasons, we urge the committee to give a favorable report.
And finally, Lori Ann.
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I am L.A. Spagnola, social worker, president and CEO of Board of Child Care, or BCC. BCC is a national organization with over 1,000 employees, firmly rooted in Baltimore, with sites across the state of Maryland, offering residential treatment, education, and community-based services to thousands of families and children. We are currently celebrating our 150th birthday. BCC fully supports supports choice of accreditation for residential treatment centers through SB 403. Choice allows agencies that look like mine to find the right fit for programming and philosophy and a federally recognized national accrediting body. BCC picked CARF as the best fit for its practice standards years ago and utilizes this accreditation standard for other behavioral health services in Maryland, such as our outpatient mental health clinic in Pasadena. During the past several years, BCC has been working to open in conjunction with the Maryland Department of Health, the Residential Treatment Center, the first one here in Maryland in more than 20 years. We discovered why it's so tough to get new providers to do this work. One thing we learned about was a statute that requires the RTC level of care in Maryland being Joint Commission accredited. Since BCC is CARF accredited, you can see how that would slow us down from opening our doors to serve youth stuck in emergency departments. Based on this statute, we need to convert to Joint Commission. That's when we realized why it's been 20 years since a new RTC opened up. And we need to use this opportunity to encourage change by offering a choice of accreditation, just like for other forms of behavioral health care in Maryland. The Board of Child Care strongly encourages a favorable report on SB 403. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell me how many residential centers we have now for children in the state? Do we know?
In this state, there are 6 providers.
All over the state. How many
Yes.
beds? Do we know how many beds?
329 RTC beds.
And so I know there's a need for more because I've heard from constituents who cannot find placement for their children. So
correct.
Thank you for this bill. Thank you, Senator Klasmeyer. Do I have any questions for this panel? Any other questions? Thank you. And we have one more witness, Ann Geddes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Ann Geddes with the Mental Health Association of Maryland. MHAMD is a nonprofit mental health education and advocacy organization, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 403. As has been said, but I don't think it can be overstated, over the last decade in Maryland, the closure of multiple residential treatment centers has resulted in children and adolescents who need intensive mental health treatment being stuck in emergency departments. The entire pipeline is clogged. Many children who are lingering in emergency departments are waiting for a psychiatric inpatient bed, but there are youth stuck in hospital inpatient units waiting for a placement in a residential treatment center. There simply are not enough residential treatment centers in Maryland that can treat youth with a wide array of conditions. And that's part of the issue too. It's not just having the beds, it's beds that can treat kids with co-occurring autism and mental health issues or other co-occurring conditions. Youth can wait many months for a placement in an RTC. Senate Bill 403 will help by allowing more choice in the accrediting bodies allowed for RTCs, thereby attracting more providers to open or expand units. By allowing residential treatment centers to be accredited by more than one accrediting commission, Senate Bill 403 can serve to alleviate the shortage of RTC beds in Maryland, again, that can treat a wide range of youth. For this reason, MHAMD supports Senate Bill 403 and urges a favorable report.
Thank you, Ann. Do I have any questions for this witness? Thank you very much. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 403. Now, Senate Bill 436, Senator Guile. I have your panel as Roger Mano, Kenny Malik, Jason Williams, and Jeffrey Gaddy. Senator, you can have as much time as you need to present the bill. The panel each has 2 minutes. Please respect the time. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Fellow members of the Senate Finance Committee, SB 436 elevates the maximum penalties for intentional violations of misclassification, wage theft, workers' compensation fraud, unemployment insurance fraud, federal FICA withholding fraud, and establishes referrals to both state and federal agencies in such cases. As background, the Workplace Fraud Act established a presumption that work performed by an individual paid by an employer creates an employer-employee relationship subject to specified exemptions. The ABC test incorporated in the Workplace Fraud Act is used by the Maryland Department of Labor to establish whether an employer-employee relationship exists for the purpose of determining whether an employee has been misclassified under the Act. While only used to detect workplace fraud in the specified industries, MDL is required to use the ABC test in determining whether an individual is an employee in any industry for the purpose of determining whether the employer should pay unemployment insurance for the individual. The ABC test has three components, all of which must be met to establish that an individual is an independent contractor and not an employee. First, the individual is free from control and direction over his or her performance, both in fact and under the contract. Second, that the individual customarily is engaged in an independent business or occupation. And third, the work performed is outside the usual course of business or outside the place of business of the person for whom the work is performed. The Act distinguishes between an employer who improperly misclassifies an employee and an employer who knowingly misclassifies an employee. And civil penalties are more severe for an employer who is guilty of knowingly misclassifying an employee. The maximum penalty for a knowing violation is a $5,000 fine for each employee who is not properly classified. Contractors and subcontractors working on eligible public work projects in Maryland must pay their employees a prevailing wage rate. The Commissioner of Labor has the authority to enforce contractors' compliance with the prevailing wage law, including assessing liquidated damages of $250 per day per employee that is not paid the proper prevailing wage. Among other penalties, a person is required to withhold income tax and who willfully fails to withhold the tax is guilty of a misdemeanor. Generally, a person who willfully or with the intent to evade payment of tax or to prevent the collection of tax fails to provide information as required, provides false or misleading information, is also guilty of a misdemeanor. The issue at hand now here is that worker misclassification is a crime and it is fraud. By illegally classifying workers as independent contractors, employers cheat the federal, state, and local governments of taxes and revenues. Wage theft is the largest form of theft in the country. The Northwestern Institute of Policy Research found that stricter state laws lead to less wage theft, even when controlling the demographic, economic, and political factors. That same study found that the victims of wage theft were disproportionately low-wage workers, especially women, minorities, non-U.S. citizens, and non-union workers. One study found that Minnesota, a state with comparable population size to that of Maryland, lost $136 million in state tax revenues due to construction payroll fraud, including $65 million in income taxes, $13 million in unemployment insurance contributions, and $58 million in workers' compensation premiums. Wage theft and misclassification robs our state employment and state unemployment and workers' compensation systems. Current state penalties fail to dissuade some contractors from committing wage theft and misclassification. With only 15 wage and hour enforcement officials for the entire state, unscrupulous companies can price in the cost and risk of current penalties if they are caught and continue with their wage theft practices. This is workplace fraud, and the state must intervene to allow contractors that play by the rules to have a fair and equitable business environment. The solution is that SB 436 will establish criminal penalties for employers who knowingly fail to properly classify individuals as employees, and for contractors and subcontractors that knowingly violate state prevailing wage laws. The emphasis is on knowingly. This is not something that you negligent, make a mistake. This is a knowing violation of the law. In addition, it would require the Commissioner of Labor and Industry to refer complaints that allege violations of tax laws under certain circumstances to the correct administrative authorities. Enacting SB 436 would position Maryland among several other states that rightfully recognize wage theft as a criminal offense, including California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New Jersey. In fact, the laws that I cited earlier that there are violations for misdemeanor, that's for when you deprive the state. In this situation, there's nothing that says that there's a criminal penalties when you deprive the worker. Per the fiscal note, the Department of Legislative Services believes SB 436 would not require additional state staff and therefore would have a minimal fiscal impact. And for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on SB 4036. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator, who would like to go next?
Me, please. Thank you, esteemed members of the committee. I'm currently the president of a mechanical and electrical contractor based out of Lanham, Maryland. We provide a full spectrum of services with licensed steam fitters, electricians, plumbers.
Can I interrupt you just a minute? What's your name, please, sir? Your
I'm
name.
sorry. Jeff Gaddy.
Thank
My apologies. Thank you. I'm currently the president of a mechanical electrical contractor in Lanham, Maryland. We provide a full spectrum of services with licensed steam fitters, electricians, plumbers, sheet metal craftspersons, and other trades. Our clients include residential, commercial, industrial, municipal, and federal infrastructure. We operate in public access arenas, and we also operate in top secret ones as well. I've been in my current role in Maryland for 8 years, but I've been in the infrastructure and construction industry for over 15. I currently sit on the board seats within the Mechanical Contractors Association of Metropolitan DC, as well as the Metropolitan affiliate of the National Association of Electrical Contractors, NECA. My family and I have been residents in Prince George's County for over 10 years. The reason I'm here is to endorse the submitted bill for a number of reasons, but I would like to mention only a few during a short period of time allotted. One of the first things I learned growing up, but that was reinforced when I attended the academy here in Annapolis, and then when I was in the United States Marine Corps, was take care of your people first. In essence, so long as the unit commander was able to provide resources, encouragement, guidance, in order for their team, everyone, including the commander, would benefit. As I subsequently found this out to be true in the private sector as a construction project manager, understanding each professional's licenses, their skill sets, their motivations, and all encompassed to provide the highest level of craftsmanship in the most safe and efficient manner possible. The tradespersons I have had the opportunity to work for and work with have taken pride in the training, the education, the certification, the licensing, and experience that they bring to bear. They also take pride in the effort necessary to attain those skills. When one or more unskilled trades misrepresent their craft, it may be a short-term benefit to actors looking to make a quick buck or increase their margin, but it, in my experience, decreases the quality of the out product.
Can you finish your thought, please? Your time has passed. Just
I'm sorry.
Finish your sentence.
Thank you very much for that. I didn't realize that indicator. In these instances, we seemingly do not have a major, I basically would say that allowing that to happen is tantamount to allowing a pharmacist to allow a sermon intern to act in their stead to mix prescriptions.
Thank you. Thank you. Who's next?
I am Chairman Butler. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank this committee for the time. I won't take up much time. My name is Gerald Jackson. I'm the Assistant Business Manager for Plumbers and Steam Fitters Local 46 in Baltimore. I'm also the Secretary Treasurer for the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO, and I'm testifying today in support of Senate Bill 436. In this climate of decriminalization, crimes against working families should not be considered as minor nuisances. We need to stop making excuses for the businesses who deliberately cheat Maryland out of taxes, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and more importantly, cheat the hardworking men and women of this great state out of their guaranteed wages and benefits. In Maryland, if you mistakenly cheat on your taxes, it's a crime punishable by fines and harsh penalties. But if you're a business who deliberately cheats the state and workers out of their hard-earned money, we ignore the problem. We have evidence that unscrupulous contractors in the construction industry have taken advantage of workers, most of whom are people of color or immigrants. These workers depend upon the state legal system to protect their right to be paid correctly. It's estimated that there's close to $60 million in wage theft in Maryland every year, and that number has increased. Misclassification has become a business model in the state of Maryland. Maryland's reputation as a state that doesn't protect its workers attracts rogue, unscrupulous businesses that can be thwarted by Senate Bill 436. We should not and cannot be the state that's soft on labor trafficking. In addition, Senate Bill 436 requires that these cases be referred to the state comptroller, certain states' attorneys, the U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Labor, and the U.S. Department of Treasury. For these reasons, I'm asking for a favorable report for Senate Bill 436. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we have one more. Well, then Roger, but.
Hello, my name is Jason Williams. I'm a UA 602 steam fitter apprentice, 5th year, due to graduate in June. This bill, I support this bill because I'm a product of what it takes when checks and balances are there and people do follow the law according to as the law is given. When companies are stealing, in essence, from our state, they're also stealing from someone else who needs an opportunity in our society, in our great state, to be a great citizen, to have a fair wage, and to take care of his family. I'm a product of that. I feel like I'm a successful product of that, being a father, a single father, and a taxpaying citizen in the state of Maryland. When these companies steal, it takes opportunities from other companies who are hired gentlemen such as myself. In essence, I keep the state by the work that I do. The work I do, I'm proud of. It's also given me the ambition to help others figure out the trades, to learn the trades, to find a better pathway. And when there are jobs and companies are able to provide jobs for people at a fair wage and a fair price, people are able to prosper in this great state. That's what I've done, and I aim to help others. So when we have checks and balances, those who need and those who want the opportunity are able to prosper and get education and take the lead in their communities.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Madam Vice Chair, Madam Chair, State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy was to be here. She was hung up in court and asked that I read her testimony if that is allowable.
Roger, it's allowable. Will you get 2 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Esteemed members of the Finance Committee, for the record, I am Aisha Braveboy, State's Attorney for Prince George's County, and I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 436. My office's Special Prosecutions Unit prosecutes, among other offenses, financial and economic crimes. We all too often hear complaints from workers suffering from abuse of being improperly characterized as independent contractors rather than employees, or from the frustration of being paid less than the amounts required by prevailing wage rules. In such cases, tools available to us as criminal prosecutors that can effectively address these kinds of workplace abuses are sorely lacking. The provisions proposed in Senate Bill 436 to criminalize the workplace abuses will empower our office, along with every other prosecutor's office here in Maryland, to respond more effectively to vulnerable service providers and workers. Moreover, encouraging workplace fairness will not just benefit aggrieved workers, but as importantly, provide a competitive field for those employers who play fairly and by the rules. For these reasons, among others, I support Senate Bill 436, and I respectfully urge a favorable report. Madam Chair, I'd also like to point out, and I'm available to answer any questions, that this is not a victimless crime, that across the board, overwhelmingly, going back decades and generations, the victims of this crime are largely people of color. They're poor people, and these practices under, I would argue, a Department of Labor that's not been functioning properly, that doesn't really, it's an investigative and inspections agency that doesn't do those things, has resulted in poor people staying poor generation after generation, diminished pathways for people in the middle class and for our re-entered brothers and sisters, and it's patently unfair. And this bill takes us a little bit further towards fairness. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. So we've worked on this previously.
Yes, ma'am.
But we were having issues where the Department of Labor was not enforcing.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
I think they had 14 cases last year. I saw a report. So this letter that we have from the Department of Labor says our enforcement units are finally beginning to rebuild. Thanks to the General Assembly, we are finally able to add staff to the prevailing wage unit for the first time in years, and we are filling our workplace fraud positions and seeking additional positions for that unit, as well as we have the executive order from the governor. So I thank you for bringing the bill. I do think things will be improving, and I think have you seen the amendments that Department of Labor is suggesting?
I've not, Madam Chair. I will say that going back before the beginning of this term, we met with the agency, we met with the budget chairs. Respectfully, we urged the inclusion of 50 fully resourced field inspectors. Those are folks who sort of live out in the field on inspection sites. At any given time, there's about 3,600 prevailing wage work sites in the state of Maryland. Those are state work sites. You can imagine how many private sector work sites there are. Right now, there's one inspector, and according to Commissioner Virk, in the history of the state of Maryland, there's never been a single debarment. That's an agency that, in my opinion, the only conclusion that I can draw is that it is that way by design. It's been that way since the 1950s. I think well, I'll reserve my characterization of what that policy represents in American history.
Thank you. And I think we have a question from Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And your comments, I guess, are kind of leading me to think this as well. I was looking at the comptroller's testimony and the Department of Labor's testimony as well, too. Where is the evidence that this is occurring?
It's interesting, Senator. If you're prosecuting a murder trial and the defense kills all the witnesses, no evidence, no prosecutions. That's analogous to what's going on here. You have an evidence collection agency, a prosecutorial agency with no inspectors, no evidence, no prosecutions.
Okay, I mean, I'm reading Department of Labor's testimony, and it said that they are finally able to add new individuals to work on this. But again, if that were the case, we have laws on the books currently that would allow them to seek the bad actors here, right?
They are. They're civil violations if your victim is a human being. They're criminal violations if your victim is the state of Maryland being denied their taxes.
So the chair mentioned that last year there was 14 cases. Is that right?
I will take them at their word.
So 14 cases. Again, I'm trying to find the justification why we need to increase penalties. There's only 14 cases last year. It would appear that everybody is operating in good faith and that this is not occurring. I mean, where's the evidence that this is occurring?
Senator, if I can add, it's because they didn't have the enforcement. If you read the entire letter, it talks about they didn't have the people in the field to enforce. The number had decreased significantly over the last few years because they didn't have the people investigating and enforcing.
So again, my point would be then, why is the enhanced penalties necessary if what you're saying is that there weren't enough people to go out there and enforce it? So let's say now they do go out and enforce it. We don't know what that's going to turn up. We don't know if it's going to turn up the 15th case or not. I mean, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But why the necessity to bring in criminal penalties if we don't even know that this is necessarily a problem?
So forget the criminal penalty aspect of the bill. Let's just deal with the mandatory referrals, which I think is absolutely appropriate. And we can argue, and the legislature has been debating for many years as to whether we should have more criminal penalties on the books, whether we should decriminalize crimes. You've been an advocate for that for many years, Senator Hershey. I would argue that the issue is that there's nobody providing any disincentive for this to continue. If you go back and read the 2019 Workplace Fraud Evaluation Unit audit that was just done, called for by the Joint Audit Committee, that audit was reviewed by John Monroe of Foundation for Fair Contracting. He was able to extrapolate from the data revealed in that audit that on any given year in the state of Maryland, there's $1 billion or more in unrealized wages and revenue. And from that, the state is being denied $100 million a year in unrealized payroll revenues. So we can, if you just put aside the human carnage here in terms of people being denied their opportunities, just talk about the issue that the state of Maryland is in right now. And I was privileged to serve on the Senate Budget and Tax Committee for many years. And every 5 or 10 years, we come up with a situation where we're running short, as you are right now. In fact, there's a whole host of legislation before you. One bill was heard yesterday, extremely controversial, to raise revenues to fund extremely laudable projects, including shock trauma and other great institutions in the state of Maryland. Here's an opportunity for you to capture $100 million a year in unrealized revenues by simply mandating that agency does the job that it's required to do under statute.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Now, this doesn't talk about anywhere about adding staff to Department of Labor to carry out this, does it?
I thought you were asking a question about why the unit's not working. And why the bill if there's no evidence that the unit's not working. I just provided you with evidence. You can go back and check the record. You can read the audit report as to why the agency is not working.
So my point is that there are currently records on the book that would try to capture the bad actors, right? This enhances the penalties and brings in criminal offenses now that would send individuals to jail if they're doing that. But what has been discussed as well too is that Department of Labor simply doesn't have enough people to go out and check all these sites, as you mentioned. So does this bill increase the amount of individuals working at the Department of Labor to carry out the aspects of this bill?
Senator, if I may, if you look at the letter from the Department of Labor, they're saying that their enforcement units are finally beginning to rebuild. So recently they are currently in the process right now of actually rebuilding and adding more staff for enforcement purposes. But this bill not only does, it also, I think, sends a message. If you have not only just civil penalties, but you also have criminal penalties, that inherently then there will be greater compliance. So I think there's two aspects of it, not only hiring more staff, but also sending the message that we're taking wage theft seriously.
And Senator, I do understand that, but at the same time, I'm just trying to go by the evidence that because there's not enough people at Department of Labor carrying out this, that maybe there aren't as many offenses as the individual that Roger's report referred to. Therefore, shouldn't we just allow Department of Labor to increase their staff? And then let's see what type, how many offenses there are out there and handle them with the current laws that are in place.
I don't think it's an either or, Senator. I think we can do both. I think we're allowing the opportunity for the Department of Labor that what they're doing right now is beefing up their staff. It says right here in their letter, but I think we can also make sure with just what Roger pointed out with how much revenue that the state is losing right now because of wage theft. I think there's an opportunity to recapture that money. And I think additionally, we can do both. We can have more staff at Department of Labor, which they're currently doing, and we can also send the message that we take wage theft seriously.
I understand. Might not agree that we necessarily need criminal penalties yet for this type of activity, considering that we don't know that it is as rampant as some people believe, but I appreciate your response.
And if I could just make one quick comment, the criminal penalties, this is for a knowing violation. I mean, this is somebody knows that they're committing that this isn't just a mistake. This is a knowing violation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hirsch.
Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the bill sponsor just pointing out the comments she just offered, because I was a little confused listening to my colleague and his concerns, and yet I was reading an employer found to have knowingly failed to properly classify. So this isn't just tripping up somebody who made a mistake and risking or jeopardizing the risk of their going to jail out of a mistake. This is when there is a finding of it happened and was done knowingly. So thank you, Bill sponsor, for pointing that out, because I was a little confused from what I was hearing with my colleagues' concerns. Madam Chair, you pointed out that they're finally the department is getting in the necessary people to do these inspections. I'm reflecting as to how it may have come to pass that there were so few inspectors going out to do this work. And it occurs to me that perhaps the previous administration was not necessarily prioritizing the needs and rights and well-being of our employees, and as a consequence, may have been starving the department of the necessary personnel to go out and do this. So I'm very pleased to hear the chair indicate that this administration is taking the issue seriously and is showing that concern. I will also, and I apologize if this was brought up in the introduction of the bill, I was in another committee, but this referral indicates that on a showing by clear and convincing evidence. Now, bill sponsor, I know that you're a practicing attorney. If this wasn't already brought up, and stop me if it was, would you share with all of us what that standard is, for instance, compared to preponderance of the evidence?
Sure, Senator. Now, if I go back to 1L from law school, and I think in short, this is, and I appreciate, as always, your very astute observations, Senator. I mean, this is not only the knowing violation, but there is also a substantial amount of evidence that there has been a violation. I mean, I don't know other way to put it. Clear and convincing is exactly what one would think it to mean.
A
that there
very
is
high bar.
yes, exactly. Thank you, Senator.
Very high bar. No, thank you for that, sponsor. Listen, again, after having listened to my colleague, I don't know how the rest of the committee might feel, but I'm confident that perhaps he might support an amendment to the bill that ensures funding for additional positions, because I heard him opine about the lack of personnel. So bill sponsor, maybe you'll want to look at an amendment.
Oh, I'm sure the good senator will provide those proposed amendments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but not in the jovial sense, but I kind of want to follow up on that discussion about knowingly and not knowingly, because we've sort of had fun with it and everybody knows everybody. But Roger, you've testified on this bill a number of times.
Yes, sir.
And I'm reading and this is not new testimony, the Associated Builders and Contractors. I'm reading their testimony. And it says, as written, this bill seeks to make it impossible for businesses to engage with independent contractors for fear of possible criminal prosecution. Such an action would destabilize the construction industry in Maryland. So what I'm interpreting from that, because I don't do a lot of I'm learning about this, is that, for the general contractors, they're being held liable for the independent contractors that they bring in on these jobs. And they're saying that how can we police what these independent contractors are doing to what extent do you evaluate that criticism of the legislation?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Mounts, for that question. And you are correct. There's a lot of legislative history on this. Senator Hershey and I have had this dialogue before, so it's in the record more than once. On the next panel, you're going to hear from a current member of the ABC board. He has run an open shop business, construction business for many, many years. He was run out of town by unscrupulous contractors because he won't cheat. It's a terrible situation. This is an open shop company, Maryland, homegrown. And you're going to hear a heartbreaking story, Senator. I don't think that the answer is jumps out at you, and I don't think the underlying problems jump out at you. It's a little bit mysterious, which is why, you know, we've reverted to a bill such as this to elevate the penalties to create, you know, some extraordinary disincentives for the behavior that's putting good, hardworking, homegrown Maryland businesses, in this case, non-union, which is perfectly fine, out of business. And it's terrible.
So
I'll let him answer the question though, Senator.
So in a sense, you would agree that, you know, this would include some honest folks would get sucked in with this as well as the dishonest. What you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that rules exist to provide incentives and enforcement for certain behaviors, right? I wouldn't suggest eliminating all laws because they provide a disincentive or a structure for industries or for society. More often than not, good actors are not brought before tribunals and regulatory agencies. I mean, it's very, very rare. It is the case when there's evidence that there's something awry that shouldn't be, that discriminates against good businesses or who are not engaging in that practice, where the oversight function comes into play. In this particular case, there's an agency that, I think not in my opinion, in probably most people's opinion, is not functioning in the capacity that was required to do under statute. So I don't think it unfairly penalizes good actors, as you will hear from Mr. Malik Mechanical after this panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I've got to go to a meeting at 3:30, so I think I'll miss that testimony. So
I hope you get a chance to speak with him at some point, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You can always watch it later, Senator Max. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And, thank you, Senator, for this bill. Recently, last couple of years, there was a big case in my county. Contractor on a government project to renovate one of our schools was found to stolen several $100,000 from workers. And so this problem is there, I've heard. But do you have any estimate what, I know it's not everyone in industry are like this, but it's a problem. Do you have a number, estimate what percentage of firms might be engaged in wage theft or fraud? Any studies out there?
Go ahead.
There are a great many people, some you'll hear from today, who believe it's rampant across the board in the state of Maryland. It's a cost of doing business because the 1 in 100 chance that you get hauled before Department of Justice or the IRS for these practices, particularly in the case of the Maryland Department of Labor, it's a civil violation. It's sort of acceptable cost of doing business. As was mentioned before, according to Commissioner Virk, there's never, ever, ever in the history of the state been a case of a debarment for one of these crimes.
Thank you. And I wonder, thank you for that answer. I wonder, we talk about crime on the streets, we talk about juvenile crime, and there's a push to get tough on juveniles doing crime. And with this wage theft, you have adults doing crime. I mean, it's the word theft and fraud all over this bill and the testimony. So if we want to cut down on juvenile crime, why not cut down on adult crime? I mean, do you see a parallel between the two? Because if someone works and they cash their paycheck and they're going home and someone put a gun to their head, I mean, they're criminally liable for that, right? So if they don't go home with the amount of money that they work for, I mean, what's the difference, right? It's just because, I mean, a theft is theft. I mean, do you think there's a parallel between those scenarios?
If I may, I mean, I think that we can all agree that any crime, fraudulent type activity is all around bad, and that there should be appropriate, strong penalties for such actions. And I think that that's what this bill does, is impose more than just civil penalties, which, as Roger had rightfully indicated, has just become a cost of doing business. And by imposing stronger criminal penalties, that we would hopefully deter such actions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And multiple people have pointed out the knowingly piece. I know Ms. Brayboy was intending to be here, and none of you are prosecutors or state's attorneys, but I would presume that state's attorneys are able to distinguish the knowingly piece, and that knowingly, if our legal system is able to tease apart a mistake versus a knowing crime, right?
Absolutely. I mean, knowing is used in other crimes as well. It's a clear mens rea that you did this intentionally and knowing that it was a violation. So absolutely, it's a legal term of art that any state's attorney I mean, I've never practiced criminal law a day in my life, thank goodness, but I think that there's certainly state's attorneys that are very much aware of this term and this level of standard.
Right. And it's great that the Department of Labor now is finally deciding to address this issue. But in this way, by putting it into statute, obviously, this will ensure that future departments of labor and future administrations will continue to uphold that responsibility. Right.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I see no other questions for this panel. Roger, we had a Kenny Malik signed up for your panel. Is he here? Okay,
Yes,
he'll
ma'am,
come up
he's-
next. Okay, thank you all. I'm going to bring up the next panel. Kenny Malik, John Monroe, Robert Griffith, Bruce Bariano, Andrew Costa-Kelser. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Fred Cotting. You see Bruce? Well, he's going to miss his chance.
My name is Kenny Malik, and I own and operate Malik Mechanical Contractors. I'm an open shop business owner that served as an ABC board member for 5 years. In July of last year, I was burdened with the heaviest decision in my 30-year career. Break the law by getting cheap labor through illegal labor brokers, or shut down my contracting business because I can no longer compete legally. I chose to shut my business down. This underground labor system exploits illegal immigrants and is discrimination. This is no different than the exploitation that happened during slavery. This discrimination is padding the pockets of developers as their buildings are being built at a discount. Developers and general contractors know that this is happening on public and private construction projects. I know this firsthand, as I have indirectly participated in this illegal broker system. Several months ago, a general contractor asked me to increase my labor on a project. I told him that I did not have the extra labor available, but would instead bring in 20 illegal 1099 workers. He shrugged his shoulders, turned his head, and walked away without another word. This general contractor ranks in the top 5 in the United States. ABC knows that this is happening, but can't fix it, as half of their members are addicted to this illegal labor. I watched the construction industry come together and figure out how to build buildings and keep workers safe during COVID. This industry needs to come together and figure out how to build buildings and legally pay the people who are doing the work. They choose not to. We let these immigrants into America and are working them. It's time to legally pay them for doing the work that needs to be done that our citizens don't want to do. Construction companies used to operate with morals, values, and within the law. We are now being forced to exploit people and break the law, as there are not enough U.S. citizens entering the construction industry. Behaviors will not change without consequences. We need government intervention, as our industry is addicted to cheap illegal labor and it can't help itself.
Thank you. John Monroe.
Thank you. My name is John Monroe, Executive Director of the Foundation for Fair Contracting Mid-Atlantic Region. We are enthusiastically in support of Senate Bill 436, a nonprofit headquartered in Prince George's County. Our funders include the National Electrical Contractors Association of Our funders include the National Electrical Contractors Association of Metro Washington, the Mechanical Contractors Association of Metro Washington, Iron Workers Employers Association, and several local building trades unions. The competitive value of these employers is second to none. In fact, a December 2022 study conducted by Independent Project Analysis titled Quantifying the Value of Union Labor in Construction Projects, using data from 1,550 capital construction projects in the United States, found jobs that use union labor achieve 4% lower total cost than those that use non-union labor and are 10% more predictable due to greater productivity, less worker turnover, and the availability of reliably sourced labor. Due to compliance market failures, however, Maryland's law-abiding construction employers are often underbid through illicit means, losing work to unscrupulous primes and specialty subs who subcontract down-tier to labor brokers who carry their water because the benefits outweigh the risk. We estimate that Maryland suffers more than $1 billion of unreported taxable wages a year, resulting in more than $100 million in unrealized tax revenues, much of it from misclassification and prevailing wage theft. Your constituents, including law-abiding contractors, are counting on you to be tough on crime and to bridge government enforcement silos. SB 436 serves these imperatives. Please vote yes.
Madam Chair Vital, Vice Chair Klaus Myers, and committee members, I would first like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. My name is Robert Gifford, and I am a business agent from Steam Fitters UA Local 602, which represents over 5,700 members in the DC metro area. Wage theft is becoming the business model in the construction industry and in the state of Maryland. With the risk of being caught for wage theft being so low that it makes economic sense for employers to commit wage theft on a massive scale. In a study published by Yale University in 2018, employers steal more wages from their workers in each year than is stolen in bank robberies, convenience store robberies, gas station robberies, street and highway robberies combined. Wage theft is, by many accounts, one of the most common crimes committed in the United States. People most affected are women, minorities, and those without legal authorization to work in the United States. These companies thrive on these workers because these workers are less likely to have the time to take to file a complaint and work their way through the complaint process. Most of the time, they are afraid of losing their jobs, become blacklisted, or becoming retaliated against in other ways. A recent survey indicates there is an estimated $1 billion in estimated unreported Maryland wages, accounting to an estimating $100 million in annual Maryland revenues, specifically due to problems that this legislation addresses. Most of these are wage theft cases in the construction industry are from independent contractors who are paid less than the minimum wage, no overtime, no benefits, not taxed, no workers' compensation being deducted, no unemployment insurance, and should be classified as employees under the Maryland state law. Senate Bill 436 would require that all these cases be referred to the state comptroller, so these bad actors must pay their share of taxes, unemployment insurance, and workers' compensation. The state of Maryland become a safe harbor for these companies, and we are hopeful that Senate Bill 436 would deter these companies from stealing from the workers and the taxpayers of Maryland. I would thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak today and ask for a favorable opinion on Senate Bill 436.
Thank you. Perfect. Andrew Costa-Kelser.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Before I begin, and perhaps before my time begins, I'd like to address something that Senator Ellis brought up, because I actually filed
No,
a
sir.
lawsuit.
We don't go back to that. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I will reference it then my testimony.
Okay.
My name is Andrew Costa-Kelser. I'm an attorney. I've represented workers in every imaginable industry in the United States for the past 15 years. And I have filed dozens of wage theft lawsuits throughout the United States, including in Maryland. In fact, I filed the lawsuit in Charles County that Senator Ellis referenced earlier. That is case number 8 CV 21530 in Circuit County for Charles County. We did settle that lawsuit, and we did get a 6-figure settlement. Do you know what that employer was doing simultaneous to settling that lawsuit? Running the same exact scam in Prince George's County. And now we have a federal lawsuit in Prince George's County against the same bad actors. So to Senator Hershey's questions about where is the evidence that it's happening, I have the evidence. I filed the lawsuits. 2 workers participated in that lawsuit. 14 others were also victims of wage theft. The amount of unpaid wages on that project was in the millions. Most of the workers were not willing to come forward and participate. But because other workers saw the outcome in that lawsuit, including in Prince George's County, now people are willing to come forward. Not everybody. and it is a drop in the bucket. The lawsuit in Prince George's County, we have 10 plaintiffs who have come forward over the course of 2 years. They were not paid several hundred thousands of dollars. And these are state-funded projects. I think what is important to know about workplace fraud and workplace misclassification and wage theft generally is that it is a byproduct of an employer receiving a massive benefit by failing to properly pay workers, and ultimately workers lose. It is an abusive system. And just like any abusive system, it is because a power dynamic exists where somebody knows they can get away with it. And when they know they can get away with it and they know the state is not doing their job, then they're going to continue to do it. And I always think back to Paolo Borsellino, who was a prosecutor in Sicily, who prosecuted the mafia. And he said, the way to stop the mafia is to make the state work. This bill will make the state work.
Thank you. Fred Cotting.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Fred Cotting, and I'm here on behalf of the Iron Workers Employers Association and ACE, the Alliance for Construction Excellence, which we met a couple of weeks ago. I had a meeting Monday with Secretary Wu and her staff in the Secretary of Labor's office. They told me that they are applying for 5 additional investigators. That is totally inadequate with what's going on out there. This cancer in the construction industry started in the 1990s, and there are models out there now with major companies who are not paying what they should be paying, and misclassifying employees. Now, if you have any questions about the extent of it, you would like to, and you're likely to hear opposition, which was referred to earlier from the ABC. They will say you have enough laws on the books right now, but what you have is not working. I repeat, what you have is not working. You can ask the 45 iron workers who were on an HMW project out of Clinton, Maryland. The company falsified its certified payrolls and hid the fact that they were paying at least $14 an hour less than the project's required wage under prevailing wage for iron workers. Neighboring jurisdictions are disbarring employers for misclassifying employees. One example is Virginia, and I included their code section in my pre-filed testimony. A drywall contractor was just nailed by the Attorney General for the District of Columbia for misclassification. And there was a large monetary sum that was added to that. I suggest that you consider disbarment in a different fashion than what's in your current laws, because it's not working. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have questions for this panel? Senator Classmeyer.
Yes, I think it's Mr. Monroe.
Yes, ma'am.
No, okay, it's not you. Robert?
Monroe, I'm right here.
I'm the ABC. Okay.
Alan.
Okay. They're all kind of confused right now. The names. Is your ABC the ABC contractors that are usually at odds with the unions?
Yes, I am. I'm Associated Builders and Contractors. I've been a member there for almost 30 years, and I sat on the board for 5 years.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know, because it's nice that we're working together, as many of us have suggested over the years. So that's good.
I'm actually trying to work both sides. I'm actually working with the president of ABC National as well as the union parties. I'm building a bridge to try to get them both to come together to solve this problem.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, ABC is conflicted right now because a bunch of their members are dirty and he can't.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for what you're doing.
Andrew, can you tell me how many cases you might have open in Maryland right now?
Just right now, the one federal lawsuit, I have 4 in the District of Columbia and 1 in Virginia, and probably another lawsuit I'll be filing in Maryland next week. But I will say that one of the best tools that we have now is that there is joint and several liability for subcontractors and general contractors on this job. Because the way the scheme works is you have a general contractor and they have a sub who they have contracted with to perform some type of skilled trade. Let's say it's the mechanical trade. The mechanical trade goes out and gets a labor broker. The labor broker supplies the labor, and those laborers who arguably work for the labor broker, but really work for the subcontractor, are the victims of wage theft. And prior to the 2019 legislation, the subs and general contractors had no liability whatsoever. So that has been helpful in getting these civil actions resolved, but it's just not enough without criminal penalties. If you cheat on 10 jobs and you make $1 million just by cheating your workers on one job, and you pay $200,000 to settle a lawsuit, but on those other 9 jobs where you've made $1 million each, there's no consequences.
Yes.
Why would you stop?
Thank you. Senator Ellis?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I remember during the Obama administration, they really cut down on a fast food chain, Mexican chain, and they really held the corporate entities responsible and fined them millions of dollars. And I saw a change in who was able to actually work in that chain. So someone said earlier, well, you know, these immigrants, they're taken advantage of, and they do jobs that Americans don't want to do. And therefore, you know, we should turn a blind eye to what's going on. But when we say that, we're missing the fact that a lot of folks, U.S. Residents, citizens, are not even interviewed for these jobs, whether it's in unions or whatever, because they depend, the contractors and other companies depend on these unscrupulous brokers to undercut folks and not offer benefits and a fair wage. And I've seen, I don't know if you saw this also, that when the Obama administration cut down on that, you go through the airports and you see a lot of African Americans working in these restaurants. People were saying, oh no, Black folks don't want to work in these jobs. The fact is they were locked out and employers didn't want to pay the benefits of the fair wage. And I know in my district, my constituents were hurt by, you know, the wage theft that was happening. So I want to thank you, sir, for representing them. And a lot of them came to me with these issues. They're my constituents. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate you and you stand up and everyone being here to really help us put an end to this practice. And Madam Chair, is that so?
And if I could just say, first of all, thank you, but also to your question, Madam Chair. I simply do not have the capacity, and the attorneys who do this type of work do not have the capacity to file the number of lawsuits. Over the past 2 months, I met with workers. I could have filed between 10 and 15 different lawsuits, and it's simply a matter of not having the resources to do it.
Thank you, Andrew. That ends this panel. Thank you. Thank you all for your presence. We have 2 more favorable, Darwin Vanilla and Milton Corrado. If they're here. And you are?
Darwin Bonilla.
Darwin, thank you. I don't see Milton. Thank you.
Milton was on his way and he got in a car accident.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. to
So
hear that.
I got his written testimony, if I'm
Well,
allowed
you
to
get
read.
2 minutes, so you can do your testimony or his.
All right.
Thank you.
Members of this committee, my name is Darwin Bonilla. I immigrated from El Salvador in 1998. After high school, I worked for 10 years as a community organizer at Casa de Maryland. 2018, I graduated from the Steam Fitters Local 602 apprenticeship program and got my Maryland HVAC journeyman license. I lead a group of 19 organizers at the Mid-Atlantic Pipe Trace. Our job involves recruiting new members and bringing new signatory contractors to our local unions. But one of the biggest challenges we see every day is that many non-union workers, some of them because of their immigration status, are being exploited by low-road contractors. These contractors hire labor brokers to provide the workforce they need. The brokers misclassify these workers as independent contractors and cheat them of their wages. In doing this, they're also cheating the state of Maryland out of workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and also cheating the federal government, the state of Maryland, and its localities. HB 436 will help solve the wage theft and misclassification problem by creating minimal criminal penalties for contractors. We find these labor brokers on private sector jobs and state and locally funded projects. Some of the prominent examples are William Wirt Middle School in Prince George's County, Eva Turner Elementary School in Charles County, Neillsville Middle School in Montgomery County, and Parcel 4 in Baltimore. Wage theft and misclassification are rarely done by accident. For these reasons, I'm here to ask you for your support of SB 436. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Do I have any questions for this witness? No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Lights not on. Tommy Thompson, Mike O'Halloran, and Grayson Wiggins. All by yourself?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Yes, ma'am. My colleagues are otherwise detained in other committees right now, so it is just me today. Good afternoon, everyone. Grayson Wiggins with Harris, Jones, and Malone here on behalf of a few clients, the Associated Builders and Contractors, the Maryland Minority Contractors Association, and the Mid-Atlantic Floor Covering Association. I do want to quickly correct the record. Mr. Malik does not represent ABC. I don't know why he misrepresented that. I've also seen no evidence to support any of the alleged allegations he just made, and we would directly refute all the statements in his testimony. My clients are good people. They're good actors. They are in many shapes or many ways small businesses, mom and pop businesses that are trying to provide for themselves and their families. And they are concerned that we are looking at criminal penalties when we already have significant and robust civil penalties in the statute. Those weren't really discussed in detail, but I'd like to go over a few of them. So you have a private right of action, as the attorney mentioned on the previous panel. You have significant enforcement opportunity from the Department of Labor. You have aggregating penalties of up to $20,000 per employee. So the notion that Mr. Mano stated that this is the cost of doing business, that businesses are paying $20,000 fines per employee is, in my view, a bit absurd. And I have seen no, again, evidence to support that. Again, in addition to those robust civil penalties and my client's concern with adding criminal penalties when the Department of Labor has admitted that they have not been at an enforcement level that they'd like to be, we have some specific questions about the bill, specifically the fact that on page 2 of the bill, where they have inserted the criminal penalty provision, they have for some reason decided not to include any of the mitigating factors that are currently included for the civil violations. I think that's a message that we have no intention of working with you as a small business who's been alleged to have committed some sort of act here, and we instead want to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. So my clients have significant concerns with that policy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Grayson. So you represent ABC.
Yes, ma'am.
So I met with some folks from another organization. I think it's ACE, who said they run up against these projects all the time where they're trying to pay prevailing wage and other contractors are not following the rules, and it's very difficult to be competitive. But you're not seeing that.
No, ma'am. So in my conversations with my clients, we're not seeing that. I don't know of the organization ACE. I'd be interested in seeing these specific cases that they've talked about. We've heard a lot of statements, but we haven't been provided any evidence. The only direct evidence that I've really heard, to be very candid with you, was a case involving a small business that was charged with 56 counts of this under the previous administration, and the department actually had to go back and acknowledge that they were wrong, and they issued an apology to the small business. And so if this law were to pass, they'd have been looking at 56 criminal counts in a situation where the department eventually had to apologize because they were wrong.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions? Oh, Senator Reedy.
Thank you. Your testimony, you brought up something I thought was interesting. I was sitting here listening to the proponents. Sounds like, the proponents sort of make it sound like we're living in this dystopian nightmare where there's all this, labor trafficking going on. And I do believe, of course, that there are violations that happen, but it was interesting. I wondered as I sat there listening that they weren't talking. I felt like we've done a lot on this issue. Mm-hmm. So you talked about there are extremely robust civil penalties. In fact, I think I voted for some of the things that have added penalties. Because if someone has the mens rea of requirement, we know that they did this on purpose, I have no problem with them being punished. But it sounds to me like your testimony is that there are some isolated cases, but it's not widespread. I mean, can you talk a little about what civil remedies we have? There's the private right of action. What else?
Certainly, you have, as I said, you have penalties that escalate up to $20,000 per violation.
That's per violation per employee. It's like per instance, correct?
So, So these are significant civil penalties that are available to the department and can be utilized to enforce compliance now.
So a criminal penalty, I mean, we're talking that is not, you guys would prefer to see it stay in the civil remedy than add criminal penalties because we understand what happens. Could you talk a little bit about why that's a problem then to add the criminal penalties
Yeah, certainly. I think, as a General Assembly over the last few years, and I do a lot of work in judicial proceedings, we talk about the impact that criminal penalties can have on individuals, not only at the time of it being applied to them, but in the future as well. And so my clients are concerned that they're going to be facing significant criminal penalties because of a misunderstanding, or as I mentioned in that previous case, an allegation that was untrue that resulted in 56 allegations against an employee that the department eventually had to walk back.
And if someone was convicted of something like this and there was then there's significant sort of collateral consequences long term, correct? And we've tried to avoid overly criminalizing and over policing different types of communities, including our small business folks.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And, so listen to your testimony. You said you weren't aware of any of these cases. In one case, you're of wage theft. In one case, you're aware of they were wrong and had to apologize. And so the attorney that was here, I don't know if you heard his testimony. He has several cases. I mean, those are filed and everything like that. So could you promise me to go read those cases so you really know about these things? And so because they really happen. And so, I mean, why would you come here and say you don't know about these cases when you represent these clients? You would say you're not, and these cases are out there. You would say, well, you're not representing your clients well because you're not really giving us informed testimony. It's almost like you're wasting our time. What would you say to that?
My response to that would be that I appreciate the question and I'd be happy to look at the cases. And yeah, let me be very clear, wage theft is wrong. We have no problem with the robust civil enforcement with the civil penalties that are on the books. We have no problem with that. And I'm not saying that there are no cases.
I'm saying that earlier is if someone work a job and they cash their paycheck going home and someone with a strong arm or a gun, whatever, that's a crime. The person who robbed that person will be a crime. So why is it not a crime that the employer did not pay that person the proper wage that they were due? Why should not be? What's the difference between the guy on the street sticking them up or the employer sticking them up and not paying them what they should? What's the difference? Theft is theft, isn't it?
No, so I would not necessarily characterize it as armed robbery as you are in your example.
Well, it also says strong arm, so I gave several examples.
Okay, or strong arming it. Yeah, I think the policy question here in my mind is: are the civil penalties robust enough to enforce compliance, and are they being utilized appropriately?
And you think they are?
And I think that it sounds like the penalties are enough, but the department has said that they have not been enforcing them to the level that they should be. So we are saying that wage theft is wrong, but there are robust civil penalties on the books that can already enforce compliance before we get into talking about criminal penalties, where you could have a situation where a small business is facing down a prosecutor in a criminal courtroom for something that they did not do. And are now facing an opportunity where you could have a situation where somebody's getting locked up for something they didn't do.
How about we just go after the big businesses who do major theft?
So this bill
How about
doesn't
those
distinguish
guys?
between small and large, and that's a good
Okay.
point, right? Because this is
Why?
going to apply to small mom and pop businesses too.
So would you put an amendment to just go after the big businesses? Because you're talking about, we don't want to really hamstrung the small
I don't-
business stealing people's wages.
I'd be happy
So
to
how
talk
about-
to you about it. I just don't know how you would distinguish in that.
Well, you're
in statute.
smart. You can come up with amendments. So thank
Well,
you.
I appreciate that compliment, Senator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Grayson, thank you for being here and your history with the Department of Labor. I'm sure you know what's going on.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That ends the hearing. I don't see any other witnesses, and that ends the hearing for Senate Bill 436. So our last bill of the day is Senate Bill 119, Senator Lamb. This is legal protected healthcare. Senator Lamb, you can bring up your panel, Jamie Grace Alexander, Stephanie Purnell, Heather Forsyth, Stephanie Olarte, and Aya Damons. I'll just remind everyone, the senator has as much time as he needs to explain your bill. You each have 2 minutes. Please respect the 2 minutes because everyone else is still waiting to testify. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee for allowing me to testify before you in support of Senate Bill 119. For the record, I'm Clarence Lamb, Senator in District 12. I recognize that on its face, this may look like a controversial bill, but all of the real policy questions were already dealt with last year. Last year, the General Assembly, this body, passed Senate Bill 460, which acknowledged the medical necessity of gender-affirming care, and on bipartisan basis, also passed Senate Bill 859, which sought to ensure that when a certain type of care is legal in Maryland, but under attack from out-of-state elements, it should be protected, that this medical information should be protected. This bill just puts those two issues together to ensure that patients and providers of legal gender-affirming care are free from out-of-state attack and harassment. All this bill does is add gender-affirming care and treatment as defined last year to the definition of legally protected care. Legally protected care was defined last year. This will have the effect of extending the bipartisan protections passed last year to this care as well. These include things such as ensuring that Marylanders aren't extradited to other states or have their medical records subpoenaed because they received, provided, or supported gender-affirming care. The LGBTQ plus community is under siege in our nation, and none more so than members of the transgender community. Over 20 states ban gender-affirming care currently. Just like many of the bans on abortion and other reproductive health services, many of these bans are structured in ways that could be used to harass gender-affirming care patients in Maryland or to go after the licenses of other providers. This is not just a hypothetical problem. The Texas Attorney General recently sued a hospital in Seattle in order to try to gain access to the medical records of trans patients. Vanderbilt University Medical Center recently had to turn over a significant number of medical records to the Tennessee Attorney General, including records of family members of patients receiving gender-affirming care. And finally, the Missouri Attorney General is demanding records from a gender-affirming care provider in their state. Thankfully, we have not seen these states' attorney generals turn their focus on Maryland, but it is something that could very well happen. We need to protect our constituents now. We may be wondering why this bill is needed if the governor has already issued an executive order protecting gender-affirming care. Although the governor took a very important step on this issue by issuing this executive order last year, you will hear from Ms. Forsyth that there are certain protections that are only within the authority of the Attorney General and cannot be done by executive order by itself. I understand that there are differing opinions on this committee about gender-affirming care, but I hope that we can all agree that the Maryland General Assembly should be the final decision maker of what healthcare is legal in our state, and that we should act when out-of-state actors are seeking to harass or attack any form of legal healthcare here in the state. Happy to turn it over to other members of this panel and to take any questions at the end. Thank you. I'd like to go next.
Someone would like to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jamie Grace Alexander, and I'm with the Trans Rights Advocacy Coalition in support of SB 119, which is legally protected healthcare, gender-affirming treatment. Like Senator Lamb, I want to clarify that I'm not here with you today to relitigate whether gender-affirming care is medically necessary, because it is. We, the community being discussed, you, the legislature, through the passage of the Trans Health Equity Act, and the medical professionals around me all agree that this treatment is medically necessary. Last year, the legislature also agreed to these same protections that SB 119 will establish for abortion care providers with the Reproductive Health Protection Act. Women's rights and trans justice are parallel struggles in the fight for bodily autonomy, and that protection needs parity. Since the passage of the two bills I mentioned, as well as the governor's executive order last June, we've seen a huge influx of transgender people from other states. Local LGBT nonprofit Baltimore Safe Haven saw the need for their services more than double in the last 6 months of the year. Speaking personally, I'm a recipient of gender affirming care. It's made a huge difference in my life. I felt poisoned by my own body throughout puberty, and new hormones have helped my dysphoria significantly. My life opened when I started to transition, and I'm not alone. Identifying as transgender makes me part of a community of people who are brave enough to forge themselves. Many studies have measured that hormones have a significantly positive effect on trans individuals' psychological functioning, emotional well-being, social functioning, and quality of life over time. If you need a number, a 73% drop in suicidal ideation out of the baseline 82% of trans individuals that have seriously considered suicide. So pass SB 119 and ensure that our community gets to see those positive improvements in the future. The Trans Rights Advocacy Coalition urges a favorable report on SB 119. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Heather Forsyth, and I'm here to provide strong support for SB 119 on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General. Our office is committed to defending health privacy for all legal medical care. The Attorney General strongly supported last year's bill, which provided legal protection for women and their healthcare providers engaged in reproductive health care, and this bill seeks to shield another population that is similarly threatened. Gender affirming care is legal in Maryland, as you heard Senator Lamb describe. And as you also heard described, it's under attack in nearly half of other states. One of the things that Senator Lamb mentioned is that, is there really a need for this legislation given the executive order that was passed last year? And I wanted to talk about why it's both critical and urgent, because the executive order provided some protections, but it couldn't offer many of the protections that this legislation would provide, including prohibiting liability insurers from taking adverse action against healthcare providers, ensuring that licensing and regulatory boards do not take adverse action against practitioners as a result of providing care, and placing limits on subpoenas, wiretapping warrants, ex parte orders, and foreign judgments that seek to further punitive investigations by other states into care provided under the laws of this state. And I also just want to mention that this bill doesn't require anyone to receive or provide gender affirming care. It does not change the type of care that's legal in Maryland. It doesn't change our current consent laws. It doesn't ask you to pass judgment on the merits of gender affirming care or relitigate its legality, medical necessity, or standards of care. It just asks you to affirm that Maryland patients have the right to access all legal medical care. The Attorney General thanks you for your support and for a favorable report. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Olarte. I'm a child and adolescent psychologist, and I'm also the vice chair of Maryland Psychological Association's Legislative Committee. And we urge a favorable report for Senate Bill 119. To say that suicide prevention is important without protecting access to gender affirming healthcare is to accept an incomplete picture of mental health care as a whole. I invite you to review the literature cited in MPA's letter for more information. The letter from MPA also details some often overlooked practices that fall under the scope of gender affirming mental health care that actually have little to do with the medical procedures that are often catastrophized by those who oppose gender affirming care. As a mental health care provider, I've watched in horror as a tidal wave of anti-trans legislation has stripped people of their right to basic health care while providing healthcare providers in an ethical nightmare as politicians dictate the standard of care. In the therapy room, I've had the privilege of joining gender diverse clients in their journey towards healthy psychological development. This includes client A, a 17-year-old non-binary individual who benefited from therapeutic support while navigating the intricacies of chest binding, being misgendered and dead named by multiple healthcare providers as they navigated complex health conditions that had nothing to do with their gender, and having parents who, despite being accepting, often struggle to embrace their child's gender expression. I've also had the honor of supporting client B, a 7-year-old assigned male at birth who loves makeup and mermaids and is bullied by both child peers and extended family members. Despite having supportive parents who embrace their child's creative spirit, this child still presents with signs of traumatic stress. Granting legally protected healthcare status to gender-affirming care allows providers like myself to continue to support clients like A and B towards healthy psychological development using healthcare practices that are both ethical and effective. Without such protections, Maryland runs the risk of putting gender diverse youth at risk for further harm, as well as potentially catastrophic loss of skilled healthcare workers.
Thank you. I think we have one more person to speak.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Stephanie Purnell. I'm a resident of Baltimore City, and I'm here in my capacity as the Director of Gender Affirming Care at Planned Parenthood of Maryland. I entered the medical profession for numerous reasons, but primary among those is my knowledge and experience as a Black woman navigating a health system whose structures are just now catching up to the idea that others exist. I know what it means to be an other in my field, and I want to push back on that for my patients. When I specialized in reproductive health care, I knew there would be external barriers outside the standard bureaucracy of the healthcare delivery system. But I was grateful upon graduating Howard University Medical School to become a provider of sexual and reproductive health care for organizations practicing in Maryland. The Maryland General Assembly has long been a staunch protector of reproductive health care, including abortion for a generation now. But today, when I head into a patient's appointment, I'm not still fully protected from outside political forces. In addition to abortion care, vasectomies, and reproductive health, I am also a provider of gender affirming care. My experience as a provider reflects the testimony you've heard. Patients are excited to be receiving care. There's joy in the room as patients access care that is crucial to their identities as human beings. Writing prescriptions for hormones that help my patients be authentic to themselves is one of the best parts of my day. But that joy is not total. Last year, this body protected the abortion care I provide to patients. But until those protections are extended to my role as a provider of gender affirming care, neither my patients nor I are truly protected. I became a doctor to care for people. The healthcare decisions my patients make in consultation with me and their support networks are not the business of legislators or attorneys general from other states. Maryland needs to protect my transgender patients and all transgender people who come here for our top of the line care. In addition, Maryland needs to protect my fellow providers and me who have always practiced consistent with Maryland law. Adding gender affirming treatment to the definition of legally protected healthcare does exactly that. For this reason, I urge a favorable report on SB 119. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for this panel? Senator Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Lamb, Dr. Lamb. I've got a couple of questions. First one's probably more for you in your capacity more as a doctor than a senator, although I guess you could answer both. First of all, actually on the bill, what does this bill do with regards to minors? Is there any distinction made between protections for out-of-state adults versus out-of-state minors?
This bill, last year we had a long discussion about minors. This bill simply extends the same protections for abortion care to gender affirming care. There's nothing specific about minors here. So minors can receive the care that they need. This really just pertains to protecting providers who are providing care as well as their medical records.
And any doctor providing medical care in the state to a minor has to
abide by state
consent, has to have parental consent. Can I ask you now in your medical capacity, I guess, what do we know about the human brain as it relates to the development of a human brain at different ages? We hear a lot when we talk about criminal justice about the brain and its formation until age, often as old as age 25. Folks can vote at 18, and they can go be drafted or not drafted anymore, but serve an award at 18. But we've talked a lot about internally. I mean, what is that? Is it really true the brain's not fully formed until age 25, or at least until your 20s, or is that really kind of an overblown talking point?
So I'm not a pediatrician, so I don't want to get into the intricacies of, childhood brain development.
Sure.
But that also doesn't pertain to this bill because the bill really just is limited to ensuring that there are protections in place for providers to be able to provide the care that their patients need, as well as ensuring that those medical records are protected as well.
I think it does pertain to the bill in this respect. And I'd like to get your comments on it. I'm looking at the states that some of the listings of states that have taken action to limit transgender health care.
Senator, that's not what this bill is about. This bill is simply about protecting the records.
Okay, but it's about the stated rationale for this bill is all these other terrible states and all that they're doing. And in many states, they have limited transgender operations and surgeries and other types of care for minors. So if we're talking about protecting records, I'm very concerned. There was actually a story last year about a minor that was probably basically trafficked here. I'm very concerned that we make sure that we're protecting the rights of parents and the consent of parents. I don't have as much of an issue with people who are adults that want to come here and seek treatment if they feel that they can't in another state. But I am concerned about.
But in all respect, this bill isn't about the treatment. It's not about the age. It's about protecting the work that's done both for the doctors and the patients. We did a similar thing for abortion care last year. There are issues with the data and how the data is being protected, and it's taken a little longer. But that's what this bill's about, is protecting the information for the patient and for the doctor.
Okay, I'll redirect my question, Madam Chair, to the Ms. Purnell with the Attorney General.
Forsyth.
I'm sorry, look at the wrong name. No, apologies, Ms. Forsyth.
No worries.
So these other states, because I'm sure you looked at this, I see a list, there's like 22 other states.
Roughly. Yeah.
Are all of those states ones that are limiting it? Are most of those states, am I characterized it correctly, that most states are limiting it to minors?
Well, the landscape is changing constantly, so I don't know that
Fair
I can
enough.
talk about it in detail. There's actually an article about sort of the broadening of discriminatory laws against trans people in today's Washington Post. It's very timely, and I encourage people to read it. Some states do limit the care to minors. Some states don't. Some states limit the kind of care a minor can get. Different states have different consent laws. But I think the point that we were trying to make here is that this bill doesn't change anything about Maryland's consent laws. There's a very small number of medical services that a minor can get without consent that are listed in the Health General article. And this, anything having to do with gender affirming care is not there. Thus, any minor who is seeking gender affirming care in Maryland could only do it with parental consent.
Okay. Thank you very much for the answer. That's very helpful. I think one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question as specifically as I did was through a lot of the written testimony, I'm seeing Texas reference. So I looked up Texas, and Texas, their law is about minors. So it's very citing all these terrible things happening in Texas. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, well, I mean, it's about minors though, in fairness. Now you can quibble and say, well, they're not allowing certain types of maybe counseling. And I think counseling's fine for people that are experiencing gender dysphoria. I think when we're talking about actual severe medication and operations and those kind of things, I think that's something that I think a state can argue a compelling interest. So anyway, thank you for your answers. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for this panel, and we'll go to the next panel. And we'll start with Aya Simons. Bridge Dumay, Robin Elliott, Matthew Duzick, Pam Casemeyer, and Michael Huber. I think we can all fit there. Two, three, four, five, six. Okay, Aya, would you like to start?
Aya's not here, but I'm happy to go. My name is Bridge Shumay. Great to see you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the political coordinator with 1199 SEIU United Healthcare Workers East. We represent 10,000 healthcare workers in Maryland, including members who provide gender-affirming care at hospitals and federally qualified health centers. We urge a favorable report on SB 119 and encourage you to read the 8 supporting testimonies from 1199 members who provide gender-affirming care and support networks. This bill is about freedom of health choice. Personal healthcare decisions should only be made by a patient and their healthcare provider, and providers should not be penalized for treatments rendered in accordance with the standard of care that are legal here in Maryland. All healthcare sectors in our state are experiencing a dire short staffing crisis. We cannot afford to lose any healthcare workers because of transphobia and out-of-state actors. Many gender-affirming care providers are general practitioners who offer a wide range of healthcare services. If these practitioners are punished for providing gender-affirming care, the care workforce will shrink further, putting undue burden on remaining healthcare workers and potentially impacting the quality and accessibility of healthcare. Therefore, shielding healthcare workers who provide gender-affirming care will benefit all Marylanders, not only those who receive this type of care. Maryland gender-affirming care providers are reporting a spike in trans patients from Florida and West Virginia, states with some of the most regressive gender-affirming care bans. As such, Maryland's gender-affirming care providers have a target on their backs. We call upon you to ensure these healthcare providers have a proper shield. Vote yes on SB 119. Thank you.
Robin?
Good afternoon, Robin Elliott. I'm here on behalf of the Women's Law Center of Maryland, Maryland Nurses Association, the professional counselors, the occupational therapists, Movable Feast. We have a long list of clients in support of this bill. This bill is also about access for care for in-state patients, and I just wanted to underscore that when providers are afraid of providing a certain type of care, it not only affects people who are coming from out of state, but also our residents here in Maryland. We ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Matt Dudzik on behalf of the Maryland Board of Physicians. The Maryland Board of Physicians is the regulatory body charged with protecting patients by ensuring that all medical care that is provided in the state is safe and effective. So as the agency that is responsible for investigating and disciplining physicians, I want to confirm what the sponsor said. SB 119 does not in any way limit our ability to take action against inappropriate medical care, including in the sphere of gender-affirming treatment. All medical care in Maryland must be appropriate and must meet the necessary standard of care. Unfortunately, care that is considered safe and appropriate, both here in Maryland and throughout the medical community at large, is under attack in a number of other jurisdictions. And nowhere is this more clear than in the space of gender-affirming care. As the board has watched states across the country outlawing or restricting gender-affirming care, regardless of whether or not it was done in a manner that was deemed medically appropriate, met those standards of care, we have grown increasingly concerned that out-of-state entities will attempt to use the board to attack medical professionals here in Maryland. And I want to echo what my colleague Robin Elliott just said. This is not just a question of out-of-state practitioners. This is also a question of practitioners here in Maryland that are practicing right now. While the governor's executive order does provide some protections, expanding legally protected healthcare to include gender-affirming care will prevent issues such as automatic sanctions from the Interstate Medical License Compact and other areas that are not fully covered under the executive order. SB 119 allows the board to focus on what is most important, which is protecting patients by looking at the standard of care that is being provided. For this reason, the board urges a favorable report on SB 119. Thank you.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Pam Casemeyer, and I'm going to be very brief because you've heard great testimony already. I would concur with everything you've just heard. I'm here on behalf of the State Medical Society, the Academy of Pediatrics, the Mid-Atlantic Association of Community Health Centers, and the College of and the ACOG, which is obstetricians and gynecologists, here uniformly in support for all the reasons you've heard from the previous witnesses. It is analogous to exactly what you did last year for types of care that medically appropriate, has to be appropriate, doesn't affect consent, any of those things, but for which there's beginning to be a lot of legal challenges and fear arising within the provider community, and we urge a favorable report.
Thanks. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Michael Huber, Director for Maryland Government Affairs for Johns Hopkins University of Medicine. We submitted written testimony in support of this bill, which was signed by a number of clinicians from the institution. I would just emphasize 2 points quickly. The first is that gender affirming care is life-saving, evidence-based, medically necessary, and age-appropriate healthcare. The second point is that, as you have heard a number of times, the concerns are that this bill would help protect are not hypothetical. We've seen 23 states attempt to ban this type of care, and then you've heard a number of times about the activities of the Texas Attorney General, which are quite concerning and far-reaching. So Johns Hopkins University of Medicine urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Did everyone on the panel speak? Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? I don't see any questions. Thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next favorable, I have Ryan Moran, Nicole Hollywood, Rosie Bean, Taika Torres, and Lee Blinder. You can begin if you're ready.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Klossmeyer, and members of the committee. It's good to be here today. Thank you for having us as a representative of the Maryland Department of Health to testify for a favorable report on Senate Bill 119. For the record, my name is Ryan Moran, the Deputy Secretary of Healthcare Financing and the state's Medicaid Director. I will be brief and say that this bill aims to ensure that provisions of the law safeguard healthcare practitioners from certain disciplinary actions to govern certain actions in criminal and civil proceedings, and to dictate the use and resources of investigations and proceedings concerning protected healthcare. I want to be clear from our administration's perspective and the way that we have worked with Trans Maryland and other stakeholders to implement the Trans Health Equity Act. Gender affirming care is life-saving. And in recent years, you have seen across the country a rise in states that are enacting and considering laws that ban or restrict gender affirming care. And these list of states are growing, that are in the states that are considering bills that include criminal penalties against health professionals who provide gender affirming care. And also with this bill and last year's Trans Health Equity and the work that we have done in Maryland Medicaid to implement that piece of legislation beginning on January 1 of this year. We want to ensure that Maryland remains a leader in promoting trans people's rights to equitable healthcare and safety. So the department supports this legislation and requests a favorable report.
Thank you, Ryan. Who would like to go next?
I can.
Start.
Great, thank you. Greetings, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Klausmeyer, and the esteemed committee members. My name is Lee Blinder. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Trans Maryland. I'm also the Chair of the Maryland Commission on LGBTQI+ Affairs. For my testimony in my capacity with Trans Maryland. Trans Maryland is a multiracial, multi-gender community power building organization for Maryland's trans community. We run the state's largest name and gender marker change program, offering peer-to-peer guidance and financial assistance to Marylanders who are seeking affirming identity documents. In that capacity, and here today in front of you all, we are representing thousands of transgender Marylanders and their loved ones who have detailed to us the barriers they face in accessing affirming medical care. We urge the legislature to enact SB 119, which offers this technical fix to codify Governor Moore's executive order and clarifies that life-saving gender-affirming care is protected by last year's Reproductive Health Act. In the past year, we at Trans Maryland have seen a sharp rise in new Marylanders who are seeking our services. Marylanders who are fleeing the now 22 states that have targeted this community with rollbacks to our freedom to seek healthcare that is medically necessary in the eyes of our licensed medical professionals and is backed by all major medical organizations. Maryland needs to enact Senate Bill 119 and do this simple technical fix to the Reproductive Health Act to ensure transgender Marylanders have the full protections of our government from outside states that have actively attempted to impose their discriminatory laws on us, which threaten our very lives. It's time for the law to be crystal clear for transgender Marylanders like myself and others. Maryland is a safe place for us, and for these reasons, we urge a favorable report on SB 119. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nicole, are you here? There you go. Thank you.
Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Nicole Hollywood. I'm a member of the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA+ Affairs. The commission was created by the 2021 Maryland General Assembly and later altered in 2023 to assess the challenges facing our LGBTQIA+ communities, establish best practices and recommendations for LGBTQIA+ inclusion, and provide testimony to legislative and administrative bodies. Ensuring passage of Senate Bill 119 is a top priority for the Maryland Commission. This bill will codify the executive order signed by Governor Wes Moore in June 2023. Access to gender-affirming healthcare is not only a matter of medical necessity, but is also a fundamental aspect of affirming one's gender identity and improving overall health and well-being. The following highlights from the 2022 U.S. Trans Survey Early Insights Report demonstrate the importance of access to gender-affirming care. Nearly all respondents, 98%, who are currently receiving hormone treatment reported that receiving hormones for their gender identity made them a lot or more satisfied with their life. Nearly all respondents, 97%, who had at least one form of surgery for their gender identity, reported that they were either a lot more satisfied or more satisfied in their life. Additionally, Senate Bill 119 provides much needed clarity and protection for healthcare practitioners who provide gender-affirming care by prohibiting disciplinary actions for providing legally protected healthcare. This ensures healthcare professionals can fulfill their ethical obligations to provide competent and affirming care without fear of reprisal or discrimination. Passage of Senate Bill 118 is a critical step to enshrine the rights and dignity of transgender, non-binary, and gender-diverse Marylanders and those who travel to our state for their health care. For those reasons, the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA+ Affairs strongly urges a favorable report on Senate Bill 119. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Rosie Bean, and I am here on behalf of Salisbury P5 on favorable for the bill. As a member of the LGBTQIA community, we experience a number of health disparities, especially on our Maryland's Eastern Shore. We are at a higher risk of certain conditions such as significantly less access to health care and worse health outcomes for us. These disparities come from a combination of homophobia, transphobia, a lack of access to gender-affirming care, and misinformation, and other inequities in our healthcare system, once again, on the Maryland Eastern Shore. Gender-affirming care is defined by the World Health Organization, encompasses a range of social, psychological, behavioral, and medical interventions designed to support and affirm an individual gender identity. When it conflicts with the gender they were assigned with at birth, the interventions help us transgender and gender non-conforming individuals align with the various aspects we feel that are gendered. Emotional, introspectional, and biological with our gender identity. Gender-affirming care consists of a array of services that include medical, surgical, mental health, and non-mental health services. So once again, transgender and non-binary people. Every single major medical organization, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, and the American Pediatric. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
I think we have one more person to testify.
Yes. Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Dika Torres. I'm a resident of Baltimore City and the Patient Access Program Manager at Planned Parenthood of Maryland. I've been coordinating care for transgender and non-binary people in Maryland since 2017. I was on the ground floor of PPM launching its gender-affirming therapy program in 2020. As part of the service, PPM also created a care coordination program aiding patients in navigating their transition process. Currently, I manage a team of 3 that connects our patients with the care they need to live happy and healthy lives. The Patient Access Program also offers connections to other providers that share our values. A perfect example is a patient who is having trouble sticking to therapy. My department referred this patient to someone who, like them, identifies as transgender. They've been able to stick to their appointments more regularly. I recently spoke to another patient that mentioned how much better his life is after transitioning. The patient was very timid and had difficulty interacting with people. He was struggling to be engaged in school, had very few friends, and was very withdrawn from his family. The confidence he now has in himself and his appearance has allowed him to be more outgoing. He is now in his 2nd year of college and thriving. These experiences reflect my own. The care I have accessed reflects this patient's experience. Since beginning my transition, I have addressed my anxiety disorder, strengthened relationships with my family, and shared joy, true joy, with the people that I felt I was hiding from. I feel safe in Maryland compared to other states like Florida, where I grew up, but the work I do and the person I am is not fully protected from the political climate around us. I could be subject to criminal or civil penalties simply for helping someone follow the same affirming path I have been on for the past decade. I ask that this committee protect me, the providers I work with, and my trans siblings by returning a favorable report on SB 119. Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. I'm going to give you an update on the work we've been doing for the women's reproductive rights. The companies that are developing, how we're going to protect that information are struggling, and they're going to be later than we planned. The Healthcare Commission isn't going to fine them for being late because it's been such a struggle. And the issue isn't the surgery, like the code that might be put in that will be protected. It's the notes that a doctor might put in and how to protect those notes, which would then reveal maybe procedures that were done. So this is not going to be an easy fix. It's not going to happen like tomorrow, but it is being worked on. I just wanted to assure you. So thank you all for your testimony. Thank you. Next, I have 3 people unfavorable: Jonathan Alexandra, Emily Tarcell, and Esther Zabo.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Jonathan Alexander. I'm Legislative Counsel for the Maryland Family Institute. We are in opposition to Senate Bill 119 as it seeks to provide a get out of jail free card for those that are performing gender transitions on minors in the state. It is wrong that the state allows gender transition surgery on minors. It is a double wrong that it makes it nearly impossible for a child to have any remedy against a doctor in this state using a lawsuit from an out of state. This bill jumps right over the minor, jumps right over the child. It ignores their complaint and says, hey, doctor, we will protect you from any liability, even any investigation against your practice as you're doing these surgeries. That's on page 2, line 16, page 3, line 30. Now, there are only 2 other times in Maryland's history that we provided such a shield. Last year at this time, when we did so to protect abortion providers. And the only other time in Maryland's history where the state decided to go against the wills of other states and protect Maryland residents were when slaveholders captured runaway slaves from other states. During the height of slavery, there were those that escaped the deep South, trying to find their freedom right next door in Pennsylvania. Maryland decided not to cooperate with Pennsylvania or Massachusetts or other free states, begging Maryland, just allow these folks to come across the border. But rather, they decided to protect those that were restraining and constraining the folks that were escapees here in Maryland. Maryland refused to cooperate with other states and had 11 laws to double down on that issue. And the same thing is going on here today. Over 21 states have banned transgender surgeries, particularly on children. And Maryland, once again, is making a moral decision, standing in the way of other states, not allowing those children to even seek investigations or pleadings. And for these reasons, we ask you to reject Senate Bill 119.
Thank you. Who's next?
Good afternoon. I'm Emily Tarcell, a mother, licensed therapist, and founder of Health Choice Maryland. We ask an unfavorable vote for 119, or at minimum, a carve out for those under 18. Last year, you passed HB 283, gender affirming bill. It did not have age limits. I stand corrected, as I'm hearing today, that there is informed consent that required. But that bill is now law, and children and adolescents can have radical surgery or treatment to conform to some sex identity preference that may or may not be intrinsic to self-realization. And Senator Reedy, he asked if there was an age at which you're considered, you have a mature brain, and the Supreme Court did come to that. It was in the 20s, but I can send you the information about that. In any case, we have maturing young children who may regret decisions coming forward. I'm all in favor of those who want that choice as adults. But this bill, as I understand it, does give legal coverage to the providers. And also I have questions about what does this mean interstate in terms of protecting legal records? If a child came from another state to have some procedure done here and the parent didn't know about it, could those records then be forbidden to be provided? Or what kind of investigation of the surgery itself at some future point? It's all about protecting the provider. I think minimally you have to have a carve out for children under the age of 18, and a little more investigation into what the legal parameters provided under this bill do in terms of cross-state issues regarding this. So thank you. I look forward to being informed as much as informing. Thank you.
Esther?
Yes, hi, my name is Esther Sebo. I'm also against this bill, and also for the same reason as it has been said here. This bill sounds like it is making it possible for healthcare professionals who provide gender affirming care, which according to this bill will be legally protected healthcare, to receive immunity if they follow standard protocol for gender affirming care. Gender affirming care, however, has no standard protocol. This is now proven by those countries who abandoned gender affirming care, including Sweden, Norway, and other countries who started this many, many decades ago. This would make one conclude that gender affirming care is an experimental care, and as such, it should not receive immunity in Maryland. Last year, Maryland, it seems like, opened a can of worms when it allowed minors to start on gender affirming care, which makes this issue even more serious. Last year, the Maryland legislation allowed thus experimentation on minors under the procedure gender affirming care. And this year, there's a push to give legal immunity to healthcare professionals who will provide this experimental care for minors as well. Please vote against this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do I have any questions for this panel? No questions. Thank you very much for your testimony today. So we have 3 virtual. We'll start with Joan Bryan. She's a favorable. Good afternoon. Make sure you unmute. There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Joan Bryan. I'm a member of the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA+ affairs, but I'm speaking today as the grandmother of a transgender child. Early on, he suffered from gender dysphoria, which was evidenced by cutting. It got so bad that my daughter had to hide every sharp object in the house. Only after he felt strong enough to come out to us and to be reassured by us that we loved him unconditionally, and he received gender affirming care, did he become the happy, well-adjusted person he is now. I want SB 0119 to pass, because if and when he decides to have gender affirming surgery, I want there to be the doctors who can perform it safely for him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for this witness? No questions. Thank you for your testimony. Vince McAvoy is unfavorable.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I hope you can hear me okay. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, Vince.
Grateful. Thank you so much. As Senator Reedy started last year, Clarence Lamb said that last year we had a long discussion about minors. And that discussion carried on to the House floor where GOP delegates fought because they were told that this had nothing to do with children until the very last throes of the bill, where the delegates admitted it did have to do with children. Let's look about the background of this. This started with HB 132 in 2021. This timeline is important because everyone needs to see this, how this is done in Annapolis and other states where you're incrementally moving this to legalize butchery. In 2021, they allowed children to go ahead and complain and get psychological treatment without consent of their parents, without even telling them. Senator Reedy also brought up the case currently where a child was trafficked. That child is Sage. The child and parent group in Virginia is fighting that legal battle. And to be clear, what they presented with the case is relevant to this type of bill where we're going to have children coming here, because let me tell you how we handled this. An OPD attorney, Anisha Khan, engaged in legal malpractice. She shouldn't even have a job, but she's still with OPD after what she did with this child from Virginia. And we need to fold this instance into substantive litigation against other groomers who are, when they get into the system in Maryland, are being allowed to basically gain consent where they don't have legal right. This is legally protected butchery, which is an oxymoron. Butchery is never healthcare. I am available for questions. I urge you all to look at the email I sent you all last night.
Thank you, Vince. Do I have any questions for this witness? No questions. Thank you for your testimony. And finally, we have Jill Capper.
Hello, yes, good afternoon. My name is Jill Capper, and I'm a lifelong resident of Maryland. I oppose SB 119 for what I believe to be obvious reasons. When I think of protecting people, especially children, I don't think of making it easier to alter their gender, but being more difficult, if that is truly something they wish to pursue. I believe that with the amount of peer pressure children seem to experience today, these things should be more difficult to obtain and not handed out as if severe consequences don't exist. It's my understanding that this would also protect medical professionals from liability, and that is never an incentive to do better, as far as I'm concerned. That's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Thank you. Thank you. And that ends the hearing, and it ends our hearings for today. We're going to give Tammy a few minutes and then we'll be voting.